Hello, everyone. Welcome to TechstrongTV. Today's July 14th. It's a beautiful Thursday here in Florida, in the U.S. I hope it's beautiful wherever you are. The weeks are just rolling by this year. It's impossible. I can't believe we're halfway through July. But you know, the tech news keeps coming, and innovation and information, and we try to give it to you here on TechstrongTV. We are in the process of kind of updating how we structure TechstrongTV, and we actually have, well, it's in a dev environment right now, but we have the new format, which is going to allow you a lot more customization. You don't have to listen to the whole stream if you don't want. You'll be able to zero in on certain segments of TechStrong. So stay tuned for that. It's probably going to be coming in the next couple weeks. But for today, though, let's focus on today. I always get ahead of myself. As usual, we're going to be bringing you, we'll lead off with the news around the tech world today. And now one of our interns, Natan Solomon, who's a communications journalism major up at University of Florida in Gainesville, is going to be doing the news. Giving you the news from around the world as well as from TechStrong. After that, we'll have a bunch of great interviews and podcasts. Let me give you a quick preview. First of all, I was happy to speak to my friend Prashant Najudapa. Prashant is the VP Product Management for Progress Chef Software. And he's going to take us up to date on what's new with the Chef product line, now part of Progress, as well as just some DevOps fundamentals and so forth. After that, after my interview with Prasant, I'm really happy to introduce you to a first-time guest here on TechstrongTV. His name is Sak Leviathan. Sak is VP Product at Scilla DB. It's open source database, non-SQL database, as well as a commercial product behind it. And he's going to introduce us to a major new release there, which has performance, resilience, and elasticity enhancements. Really, you know, make the database the tool of choice for many like power uses and scalability, really high scalable instances, including on Kubernetes and so forth. So welcome, Sak, to the TechStrong TV world, and check that one out. After that, we're going to go back a little bit to my KubeCon interviews, which we have not played yet recently, from in Valencia, Spain. Beautiful. What a great city Valencia was. And I'm happy to have here Kapil Thangalavu. No, I messed that name up. It's actually Kapil Thangavelu. And no, I don't get many easy names today. But anyway, Kapil is with Stacklet, and this is a conversation I had with him, as I mentioned, at KubeCon Cloud Native Con. And he's going to talk about the journey that led him to co-found Stacklet, and he talks about Cloud Custodian, which is an open source rules engine that they are very, very involved with. So stay tuned for that. And then jumping from KubeCon over to RSA conference in San Francisco. Here's another interview, which we've streamed live, but you probably, unless you caught the live stream, you weren't able to see it. And this is with John Pierce. John is the VP of Product at Nintendrich, and at least John's name was easier for me to pronounce. And he's going to talk to us about how Nintendrich uses something called resolution intelligence to analyze the threats organizations are facing, massive data lakes, etc. Good conversation with John. Check that out. After that, I'm really happy to have part 3 of the latest Haunted Hacker with our friend Mike Jones. And Mike's guest again in this part 3 is the Director of Global Intelligence at Picnic Corporation, Manit. And he hosts a podcast as well as other things. He's from London, and he's going to talk with Mike. So it's good. This is part 3 of that episode, so don't miss it. After that, we've got a few Charlene O'Hanlon interviews, also from RSA to go over with you. One is with Asaf Kachen, who's with Centra. He's the co-founder of Sentra, and they're going to discuss Sentra's data-centric approach to increasing companies' visibility and understanding. And then Charlene has Ritesh Agarwal. And Ritesh is the CEO and co-founder of AirGap, and he's going to discuss how AirGap prevents enterprises from getting infected with ransomware. Though ransomware is still on the rise, as we've been saying. Next up, we've got the Analyst Corner with Mitch Ashley, our CTO and principal analyst. And Mitch's guest is Yoni Shohet. He's the CEO and co-founder of Valence Security. And Valence Security, and Mitchell will discuss the results of their recent survey of CISOs on the state of SaaS to SaaS third-party integrations and current security best practices. They call it Shadow SaaS report. So that's pretty cool stuff there. And then finally, we've got a double dose of Mike Vizard. Mike's guest today on The View with Vizard. He has Token CEO John Gunn, explaining some recent financing and how they are trying to become the one ring to rule zero trust cybersecurity. After that, Mike speaks with Yodam Perkal. He's the head of research for Resilient, and he's going to talk to Mike about why so many instances of the Log4j vulnerability have yet to be patched. If you know anything about the history of patching open source components, I think you'll understand. Anyway, that's it for today, Thursday, July 14th. Hey, welcome aboard to our friend Mike Rothman, who joined yesterday as Chief Strategy Officer, GM Research. We had interviews with him yesterday. Mike Mitchell and I will be doing a TechStrong Today show, perhaps for next Monday. I am also off to Israel, where we will be at Yalla DevOps at the Hilton Tel Aviv. If you're attending Yalla, we are doing interviews there. We'll be streaming live as well as playing the interviews at a later date on TechstrongTV. But if you'd like to be interviewed and you're at Yalla, reach out to us, and maybe we can fit you in. Even if you don't want to be interviewed and you're at Yalla, stop by and say hello. And we'll be back after that, of course, here in studio in Boca Raton. For now, though, that's it for TechstrongTV. Let's get the show started. Enjoy.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech Conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech Conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech Conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech Conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech Conferences are produced by TechStrong Live and powered by TechStrong Group.
Hi, I'm Natan Solomon. Today's July 14th, and here are the headlines. First, NASA unveiled the first full-color images from the $11 billion James Webb Space Telescope. The 5 images released are a massive achievement for humanity and are the culmination of over 26 years of research. The pictures show swirls of galaxies, galactic clusters, black holes, atmospheres of distant planets, and even a stellar nursery where stars are born. The James Webb has an unprecedented capacity to view objects in the infrared spectrum, allowing us to see our universe with more clarity than ever before. One shocking finding is signs of water and even evidence of clouds on exoplanets, leading us closer to the answer of a fundamental question: is there life elsewhere in the universe? The telescope also provided beautiful pictures of planetary nebulas, which are areas of cosmic dust and gas generated by dying stars. One of the most stunning pictures gives us an in-depth look at the Carina Nebula, a region of the Milky Way around 7,600 light-years away. The pictures of these cosmic cliffs give us insight into the way stars are born and why they take on certain characteristics. One picture, named Webb's First Deep Field, shows a swirl of galaxies, and this seems like a massive shot, but in reality, NASA explained it really only represents a slice of the universe the size of a grain of sand on the tip of your finger at arm's length. Overall, the pictures are just jaw-dropping. Next, the solar-powered Airbus Zephyr S has spent 26 continuous days airborne, breaking the record for the longest flight of an unmanned aircraft. Zephyr flies high in the atmosphere to avoid commercial air traffic and bad weather. The aircraft has an onboard batteries, allowing it to stay airborne overnight and eliminating the need to stop to refuel. Airbus's latest flight tests are intended to test the UAV's energy storage capacity, battery longevity, solar panel efficiency, and station-keeping abilities, said a spokesman from the company. In other news, Canadian mobile and internet giant Rogers says it will give credits to millions of customers after a nationwide outage last week. The outage, which lasted more than 15 hours, also affected transportation, banking, and emergency services. With more than 11 million subscribers, Rogers is one of Canada's largest telecom companies. In a tweet, Rogers said it would credit customers with 5 days' worth of service instead of the 2 days it had previously offered. Now, Canada's Radio and Television Commission, which regulates the sector, wants a detailed account explaining how and why the outage happened, as well as the measures Rogers will take to ensure it won't happen again. During the blackout, bank machines were offline and many emergency phone services reported difficulties with incoming calls. In Canada, 3 companies, Rogers, Bell Canada, and TELUS Corp, control 90% of the telecoms market, so it'll be interesting to see how the outage may affect this distribution. Next, Amazon's Ring said in its latest transparency report that it turned over a record amount of doorbell footage and other info to U.S. authorities last year. In 2 biannual reports covering 2021, Ring said that it received 3,147 legal demands, a 65% increase from the year prior. More than 85% of the legal demands processed were through court-issued warrants, allowing Ring to turn over information about a Ring user, as well as the footage from their accounts. Amazon executive Brian Huseman told lawmakers in a letter that Ring shared doorbell footage with U.S. authorities without the consent of the owner at least 11 times so far in 2022. In the most recent episode of the Twitter Elon Musk saga, Twitter is suing the Tesla CEO in an effort to force him to follow through with his deal to purchase the social media company. Musk originally agreed to a blockbuster $44 billion acquisition agreement before backing out due to the large number of bot users on the platform. With Twitter's most recent lawsuit, the deal is most likely headed for a lengthy court battle, which will determine if Musk's termination of the deal is actually legal. With all the negative publicity, it seems Twitter has been negatively affected, as it's trading 34% below its price the day Twitter and Musk originally struck a deal. Another social media platform making headlines is TikTok, as they've started developing a new system to restrict certain types of mature content from being viewed by adolescents. Content Levels, the first version of the system, is set to launch in the next couple of weeks. It will also introduce a new tool that will allow users to filter videos with specific words or tags from showing up in their feeds. These features come after a group of parents sued TikTok because their children died after attempting dangerous challenges they saw in their feeds. Former content moderators also sued the company for failing to support their mental health. By giving users more ability to moderate their feeds, TikTok hopes to create a safer, healthier platform for kids and teens. On DevOps.com, we have an article talking about CodeLogic's newest toolkit that increases developers' visibility into app dependencies. By scanning binaries, runtime application behavior, and database connections, the toolkit uses graph technology to mark connections and dependencies in real time. The increased visibility will allow developers to have a better understanding of how a code might impact other components, boosting efficiency and productivity. Finally, on Security Boulevard, we have an article talking about data privacy becoming a growing consideration for biometrics in identity access management. Whether it be fingerprint scans or face scans, biometrics have had an increasing foothold in IAM, but this has also generated concerns about human rights and data privacy. As these authentications become more mainstream, data protection and risk assessments must also be a priority for security and IT teams, the article argues. And that's today's headlines.
This is TechstrongTV.
Hey everyone, welcome to another TechstrongTV segment. I'm happy to be joined by my friend Prasant, and I always have a hard time with Prasant's last name, but it's Prasant Najidofis, and I messed it up. Prasant, you say it.
Prashant Nanjundappa. That's good.
Anjindopa. All right. And just, hey, fair warning out there, guys. I just got back from a dentist. My mouth is kind of numb. I'm hoping I'm going to talk okay, but if anything, give me a break on this one. Prasant, of course, is VP of Product over at Progress. They're the folks behind Chef, as well as something like 40 different other products in software, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. Prasant, welcome back. Good to see you again.
Same here. Thanks for having me again. I think it's always good to talk to you and your audience. Like I always say, Chef is one of the key players in DevOps, DevSecOps space, and your audience are the right segment. They are the users of the product, and based on their feedback, we have been constantly improving our product. So really excited to be back and chat with you.
Absolutely. And you mentioned DevSecOps. Let's jump right into it. So look, I was recently at the last month I was at the RSA conference in San Francisco, and for the sixth or seventh year, we put on the DevSecOps event there at the Moscone Center, with RSA. And once again, we had an amazing lineup of speakers from the Linux Foundation and the Cloud Native and MITRE and Intel and someone from the U.S. Senate. And I mean, just a great lineup of speakers. The important thing, though, is that this year, for the first time, the question wasn't, is DevSecOps a real thing? Is DevSecOps something we should do? Right? That was a given. DevSecOps is real. We are fundamentally changing security. I mean, not that old security's gone away. It's just not as prevalent, or there's more to it now, right? With the move to the cloud, we've seen a change of focus. We've seen a change of mission. I think that's a good word. We've seen a change of the mission of security, and we've seen a change of not who's responsible, because we're all responsible, but who's fighting that battle on the front lines. It's not just the security folk. It's the developers, it's the SREs, it's the DevOps team. I'm wondering, thoughts on that.
I'm glad that theme came out, because I think you're right. DevOps was also under that kind of suspicious lens. Is DevOps important? Is DevOps, how do we do that? And I think Agile was one before DevOps. We saw the maturity over there. Now teams might not say that they're following Agile, but they are. Teams might not say that they are following DevOps, but they are. At least new entrants, new into software development process, and new organizations who are trying to bring products and services into market. These two have kind of gotten into that maturity where it is not, people are not suspicious about it. People, maybe without knowingly, they are adopting. Right? And DevSecOps was in that segment where why do we need DevSecOps? Well, what is DevSecOps? I'm glad to hear that there is increased maturity of that, because to be frank, without having those practices in place, I think organizations are being vulnerable to risks that are so prevalent right now. I say that from two perspectives. I think when we look at traditional security, there was a very intentional focus on having securing the products before taking it to market, because there were processes that were well understood and matured over a period of time. For example, before every go, no go, or go live call, there used to be a security review or a compliance review in place, right? And those people also knew what questions to ask, what software to scrutinize. Because most of the software that was actually used, or tools or hardware even that was used, was approved by the security team before it was brought into development lifecycle. But switch over to now, where developers are making decisions of everything. Right? First of all, the need of hardware is gone virtually. for the current generation developers. They don't think about data centers. They don't think about bare metals or things like that. Everything is available through SaaS, or if they need compute network storage, they are available through cloud providers. So developers have the autonomy and also the knowledge to decide what components to use to build software. And they don't bring security professionals in that decision-making process. And I don't think it is by malice, right? I don't think they don't intend to, but their focus is, how can I build this product fast and take it to market faster? And in that spirit, they don't bring security teams into the whole the traditional process. Consequently, during these audits and checks, if they bounce upon these problems, or if they ask the security personnel ask the right questions, then these problems surface. If not, these problems don't even surface until there is an attack. Right? So these attacks could have been prevented by just some small plugs in the system. But once it has happened, there is no looking back. And so I'm really glad that this awareness has come, and this is, adopting DevSecOps practices will help them arrest these issues faster in the cycle, shifting left the security and vulnerabilities, and help them avoid such data breaches or security issues.
Absolutely. Prasad, let me put the other left foot down now. After RSA, I came home, and then the following week, I went out to Austin, Texas, for the Linux Foundation Open Source Summit. Another great event. And the Open Source Security Foundation, OSSF, was a big player at this summit. And big companies behind them, Microsoft, Google, all the giants, IBM. They put tens of millions of dollars into this OSSF. And it's all about securing the open source software. Because, look, 90% of organizations, maybe 98%, use open source software today. I think it's something like 90% of all the applications we use contain open source. Right? And that's how developers build. Right? This is a fundamental. When we look over the last 20, 25 years with the advent of Agile and how software is built, and then DevOps, how software, like this whole factory, if you will, of how we build software, right, with pipelines, and much like we manufacturing. We use more third-party components to build the software. Those third-party components predominantly are open source. And so securing that open source software, we hear things like the software supply chain and software supply chain security and SBOM, software bill of material, and stuff like this. It really is, the zero trust is a big thing in software, and then there's this software supply chain security, which is inherently, I think, a DevOps, Agile, AppSec type of issue. Wondering what you guys are seeing around that.
So I would say I admit to that completely, because while it's interesting that that trend is so prevalent even in traditional or compliance-driven organizations like banking and financial sector. Mm-hmm. We think that they don't want to use open source, but I think they are also using it a lot more than any other organization, or as much as any other organization. I think there are two reasons for that. One, developers or organizations feel comfortable if they know what is in there. Right? So, for example, if you are a large organization and if you are buying a software from a smaller organization or startup, there is a typical clause that they put in saying that you need to give the source code in the vault. If you go kaput or if you go bankrupt, I don't want to be left hung and dry. I want your source code to be available with me so that I can then put my in-house team or figure out how can I continue, have business continuity for the software. Right? This is from a business continuity perspective. And this is at a very, very high level, business executives level. They think about having control of sources. Source code is important for them. And second, from developers, they feel comfortable looking at the code because although there is little or little effort actually changing the code as per their need and committing, but there is that comfort feeling that, okay, if I want to make some change for my own reason, I can go do that. Right. So knowing the source code it gives comfort or has that positive impact both at a business level and at a developer level. Second thing is, I think, far more important than the first one, which is the nature of open source, I think, is understood differently, or at least was understood differently. They think that open source means vulnerable, that everyone knows what is in there. But it is the contrary. The fact that it is open, more people look into this. And when there is a vulnerability or when there is an exposure to potential vulnerability, there are more than one person willing to contribute to fix that. And so that I think is the primary reason why more and more organizations are looking at this, because if a closed source get a vulnerability, then you are at a mercy of a vendor to fix that, right? Whoever is the proprietary owner of that, they need to fix it. And we don't even know about that vulnerability until your system is under attack, right? Because these things don't get publicized as much. Whereas in case of open source, while human tendency is to give more value to things that went bad, but if you look at data of how many vulnerabilities were exposed before there was an attack, that data, those things oversize, or there is more of that, where we preemptively addressed potential vulnerabilities and fixed that. Right? So open source has that advantage even in the security aspect. So from both of these reasons, I think we are also seeing among our customers. Having said that, there is one thing that I would say people who are adopting open source to be very cautious about, right? To keep a check of what versions of these softwares are they using, because you are as good as the code inside that. And while the communities might be very vibrant and active, they might have fixed it, but you might not have taken the right fix, right? And you might have a piece of software, older version, where the security flaw is still there, and you could be exposed to that. And that's where some of the scanners, even Chef Inspect can do some of those things. But there are a lot many tools in the market which again can assess this early on. If they do that more so, they do that for closed software also. But I think for open source, this happens faster, and there are recommendations on how to fix those vulnerabilities also in the tools that come, which identify these vulnerabilities.
So I think that's the whole point behind this SBOM, software bill of materials, right? So that you know what are the components in that software, and not just that it's a component, but what version of that component is in that software. And this is something, Prasant, that, you know what, in manufacturing, not software, real manufacturing, that's normal. Right? You got this piece and it was series 2 or series, you know what I mean? That's kind of given. We're just kind of getting into that now in terms of the software factory, of making sure we document not only what the component is, but what version of the component. Because what happens also is, I produce software. I use Chef, whatever. I produce software, and then I sell that software to a user organization. That organization, they're relying on me to update my software if a component's bad, but they need to have inside access into what, like the Log4j thing that is a perfect example. You had to go through and look at all your software that you use and find out what had Log4j in it and what versions of stuff, right? You may have had software from dozens of vendors, but the onus was on you to go find out what your exposure was, and I think that's why these SBOM things is going to be important.
And in a way, there is a similar analogy on cloud as well, Alan, because, like how easy it is to download and use open source software, practically cloud services are also like that. Right? Think about a developer. The developer, if he or she is looking at building a storage application or application which can give access to some files, they would look at which is the service that I know personally because of my past experiences, and which has the best documentation. And maybe if they are a little more cost conscious, they will look at the pricing, right? I think pricing is also an afterthought in many cases, but these are the two factors that they look at, and then they start building. Let's take an example of if it is a healthcare company, right? And if the storage system service that they took, for example, S3, although S3 is HIPAA compliant, but if it is not HIPAA compliant, then they are exposing their organization to a vulnerability, and AWS has no ownership of this, right? AWS cannot take ownership. It's a shared responsibility model, but the developer has made the choice, and the organization has to face the consequence of that. So while there are advantages of open source or cloud services, it's a shared responsibility model, and I think that is something the practitioners have to keep in mind and apply necessary checks and balances to safeguard their interest.
Agreed. Excellent. Hey, Prasad, we sit here and chat. We could talk for hours, but we're probably over time. For people who want to get more information on Chef or Progress Chef and security, where can they go?
Definitely chef.io is the place where we hang out, and community Slack is also super active, and we hang out there as well. But there is, as we were talking about cloud, maybe there is one part which I would say it could be of interest for organizations which are looking and investing more on cloud. Right, so Chef has been very focused on data center, helping organizations manage public cloud, private cloud, and hybrid cloud infrastructure, not just from configuration management, but also from compliance and security space. But recently, what we learned from our customers like SAP, Walmart, and many others, that they are in fact they started using Chef software, especially Chef Inspect, along with the premium content to start getting compliance posture of their cloud assets. Right? And this is very prevalent, and this is a common pattern that we see where organizations start using cloud alongside their private data center, public cloud along with private cloud. And in public cloud, while they start with, okay, we will do a lift and shift, we will just use the infrastructure as a service for cloud, but invariably they move to platform as service, and then software as service as well. Right? And when they move to platform as service, then the topic that we talked about, developers have the autonomy of using the services within cloud providers. And then there is a need to have compliance and security checks on them. So recently we launched a Chef Cloud Security product, which precisely addressed that aspect. And again, knowing Chef, we are code first company, and we have invested over the last 1 or 2 years on policy as code. So we are building upon that momentum to also make this having your cloud and Kubernetes container environment not just compliant as per industry benchmarks, but also have them secure for misconfiguration, identity access management, or even common adherence of best practices that cloud and container providers are saying. So all of these things are kind of made available out of box using the same language of Chef Inspect. So I think looking up for Chef Cloud Security will give them a lot of this details, and we are working on making this super easy to use and without compromising on codification of policy, codification of compliance and security. Because one of the essence of DevSecOps is automation, and for automation, codification is required. And we are working very, very hard to make that process simple by providing out-of-box resources for best practices like CIS or STIG, and even cloud, AWS, Azure, GCP, and other cloud providers best practices, or even SOC 2 compliance for cloud and things like that. So these are available out of box as part of these new offering as well.
Excellent, man. Hey, thanks for sharing, Prasad. Thanks for coming on, talking to the audience. Come back and visit soon, okay?
Thanks for having me, and I'm glad that the events are picking up and you are attending some of these events as well. I hope you'll be able to attend Chef Conf as well, September.
Send me the invites.
We are hosting it in Boston, and hopefully we'll meet a lot of our practitioners and community members there. Excited for that.
Love it. All right, Prasad, thank you so much. We're going to take a break here on TechStrong. We'll be right back.
This is TechstrongTV.
Hey everyone, welcome to another TechstrongTV segment here. I have he's a first-time guest on TechstrongTV. We've covered the company before. It's Scilla is the company, but our guest today is Sak Leviatan. Sak, welcome to TechStrong.
Thanks, and thanks for having me, and thanks for pronouncing my name correctly. Appreciate it.
You know, I work at it. I'm not perfect, but I work at it. Anyway, Sak, you know, a lot of folks out here, maybe they've heard of Scilla, maybe they haven't, maybe they're not quite sure what you guys do. Why don't we start with that? Give them a little company background and maybe a little bit of your own personal background.
Okay, sure. So let me start with myself. So I have a background in computer science, and I've been working in the industry for many, many years. I try not to count anymore. Started as a developer, then moved to product management. I spent many years in the telecom domain at a startup and later at Oracle communication unit. And after that, switched to the NoSQL domain and database domain at ScillaDB.
Excellent.
ScillaDB, the company, or let me focus on the project or the product mainly. It's a NoSQL database. Similar in a sense, the category, there are many NoSQL databases out there. Each of them like have a special, unique sweet spot. Scilla fall roughly into the wide column databases. You might heard of databases like DynamoDB or Apache Cassandra, kind of similar to ScillaDB in that sense. ScillaDB is focused on availability, high availability, meaning it's can stretch from a 3-node cluster to a 100-node cluster, although you probably don't need as many nodes. And it's based on other databases can allow a very highly available database solution. And let me give an example. One of our customers have a 3-region cluster in 3 different regions, and one of his region actually burned down in a great fire. It was published, and the customer name was published. I don't want to repeat his name here, but one of his cloud provider, which is a well-known cloud provider, got his data center completely burned down. But his Scilla deployment just continued to work as is because he have a deployment of 10 nodes in each region, so 20 nodes continue to work. One region was burned down, and they will be able to replace it. So this is a highly available property of Scilla in action. So, yeah, NoSQL. Yeah, NoSQL.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So what I'm saying, NoSQL have now a long history. It's 15 years or more than that of NoSQL databases. And the first generation, if you will, of NoSQL database was very much focused on high availability and algorithm. But performance was an afterthought on some of them.
Security as well. For a long time, I used to think NoSQL meant no security.
You're right.
Generation.
The first generation was like, I don't want to trash other databases because all databases made a progress since then. They didn't stay in place, but a lot of them were designed in the beginning as a project and not as a product, if you will. And performance and security and administration in general was not highly prioritized back then. Still, you can think about it as a second generation of NoSQL database, which already took all of this performance, security, administration into the design itself. So Scilla was a reinvention, if you will, of Apache Cassandra in a sense that we took the high availability properties, but reinvent and design everything from scratch in C++ for performance.
Excellent.
And by performance, by the way, performance is sometimes a hard to understand concept. So I think of performance in two main metrics. One is throughput, and the other one is latency. And each of them can be optimized almost independently. So why throughput? Why throughput is important? If you can, for example, give 10 times the throughput of another database, which we do, you can reduce the number of servers that you're using by 10. And you save administration, much easier to administrate. Of course, it's much less expensive if you're working on AWS or other cloud. Just shrinking the number of servers by 10 is a great improvement. The second parameter is latency. This is a little bit more tricky because it's harder to improve. While you can always spend more money and add more nodes or server to handle your throughput problem, you cannot do the same for latency. So because latency is very much coupled with architecture. And Scilla was designed from scratch in an approach that's called shard per core, which is a very, I wouldn't go too deep into the technical part, but it's designed from scratch for good performance and low latency. So we are able to provide less than 1 millisecond on average and less than 5 milliseconds on P99, regardless of the throughput. So you can throw up to 1 million requests per second, which is a lot on one Scilla node, and still get a sub-millisecond latency. And this is very significant. And if you want, I can explain why it's significant, but this is a great improvement over the first generation of NoSQL database that I mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, look, so our audience may not be familiar with Scilla, but they're very technical. And I don't think we need to explain to anyone how important both throughput and latency are, quite frankly, right? Well, because today more than ever, it's about scale, right?
Exactly.
If companies can't scale up and scale up economically, right, given the current market conditions, right? If you've got to, it's scale up economically or die, right? That's there's no room anywhere else for in it. So Sak, when we look at Scilla though, right? Apache Cassandra, an amazing product, an amazing project, not a product, an amazing project. Of course, there have been several companies that have tried to monetize it and productize it. And then there's a couple of models, right? There's the hosted model, there's the support and training, the usual open source kind of stuff. And then there's sort of an open core model, right, where you have freemium functionality. Let's talk about Scylla's special sauce is obviously around latency and reducing latency, increasing throughput. But what other kind of in the business model there? How's Scilla go to market with this?
So as you mentioned, we actually offer in all of these three options. So we have Scilla open source. You can go to GitHub, get the code, compile it yourself. And we have many, many users. We don't exactly even know how many because you can just download Scilla and run it. And that's definitely an offer that we are supporting and even encouraging. We encourage people in the community to use Scilla and contribute to Scilla even sometime. We have an enterprise version, which is a closed source version, closely following the open source. Like 95% of it is the same code, but it do have some unique feature for enterprise. A lot of them are around security. For example, I will give you a quick example, encryption at rest. Encryption at rest is a feature that we are offering only in enterprise and not in open source. And there are other features like that for performance, security, and other. And like many other, we have Scilla as a service or Scilla DB Cloud, which basically fully manage Scilla enterprise version. So it's the same enterprise database, but we manage it for you either on AWS or in GCP, and you just consume the database, and that's basically it. And we take care of monitoring, upgrade, security, patches, whatever it means to manage a database. We do it all, everything for you. And in the last year, it's become more and more popular. It's now the most popular Scilla option Out of these three options, Scilla Cloud seems to be more and more popular, and I'm sure it's not surprise for you. It's just following the industry trend. Everyone wants to move to the cloud.
Yeah, look, we live in a SaaS-y world, right?
Exactly.
And so if you could offer it as a SaaS, I think people like to consume it like that because they don't, they pay as they go. There's not that big upfront cost and, all of that. And quite frankly, they don't have to deal with much about upgrades and patching and all that. It's all hosted. It's all good stuff. All right. I think we've done a good job laying all this out now, Sak. But tell us what's new. What's news with Scilla?
That's a good question. Because I have an answer for it, so that's why I'm saying.
Okay, those are always the best questions.
Yeah, so we just released Scilla Open Source 5.0, which is our yearly major release. So we are very excited about it. If I can squeeze the history of Scilla, which is almost 8 years now, into three phases. The first phase was about performance and architecture for performance, which I mentioned earlier. The second was about complete functionality, and we are now fully compatible with both Apache Cassandra and AWS DynamoDB. And the third phase, which are starting now, is about innovating and go outside of the compatibility and introduce new features. So there are two exciting features in Scilla 5.0. There are many small ones, but let me focus on the big one. The first one is we're introducing a new consensus algorithm with Raft. Scilla basically is a eventual consistency database, but a database, and this is true for any database, have two parts of consensus or consistency. One is for the data itself, and one is for the metadata. What is metadata? The user, the node in the cluster, the schema, everything which is not the data itself. And so far, this data was propagated in the cluster through gossip, which is eventual consistency. That was fine, I guess, a few years back, but today it's not fast enough and not consistent enough. And with Scilla 5.0, we are introducing a new consensus algorithm for that. And that's mean from the user perspective that you can safely update both the schema and the topology of the cluster in a safe way whenever you want to. And what do I mean change topology? For example, add nodes. Let's say that you want to scale your cluster from 3 nodes to 10 nodes. You can now do it in a safe way and very fast. So this serves not only Scilla Open Source and later Scilla Enterprise, but of course our own cloud offering, which could now scale much faster and even shrink if you want to. All of these features, including the performance gain, also apply, by the way, to Kubernetes. We have a strong offering on Kubernetes, and one of our user, Palo Alto, a security company I'm sure you heard of, actually use Scilla on Kubernetes, and we put a lot of effort because running on Kubernetes, everyone is running on Kubernetes this day. It's not new. Sure. But we made a lot of effort to make sure that Scilla actually perform on Kubernetes in a very close performance to how it's run on bare metal or on VM. And this is not trivial, but I'm happy to say that we achieved that, and we are very happy with that. So huge. I would say that is one aspect of the improvement. The second aspect is performance. Although we are already the NoSQL with the best performance out there, we're pushing the limit on performance. And I'm happy to say that we achieved a lot of improvement in this release. And in particular, we work with AWS to optimize Scilla for their new i4i instances. i4i is the successor of the i3 and i2 family, which are instances that AWS offer for databases. So we work with them. In particular, on the i4i, we got surprising result on these instances, which is more than 2 by 2 performance compared to the i3. So for the same number of cores, you get more than 2.5 times the throughput, which even lower latency. And that was a combination of a great hardware that AWS offer, both the storage and network and the CPU. And Scilla was designed from scratch to work with these high-end instances. So to conclude, So in Scilla 5.0, we improve safety and elasticity with Raft and continue to push on performance with the I4I. So that I would say the two main things on this release. And by the way, all of these features are the way that we are rolling between our versions. First, we put the feature on open source, let it stabilize a little bit, then we backport it to enterprise, and then backport to the cloud. So we are now in the first phase of it, and in a few weeks, it will roll back to enterprise and to the cloud.
Excellent. So, and look, the Kubernetes, you talk about 2.5 times performance leap, and that attracts your attention because it's such a eye-catching, number. But the Kubernetes functionality is important because, look, I got back from KubeCon, I guess maybe 2 months ago now. But this whole cloud-native stack with Kube in the center of it, service mesh, and containers, obviously, microservices, it's really become the new compute stack, right? In many places, especially if greenfield, if you got a new application, that you're not just updating something from before, 75-80% of them are probably using this new stack of Kubernetes and cloud native. So it's an important thing. Let me ask you another question. Speaking of cloud native, so look, observability is all the rage. Everybody wants to get their hands around, better insight into how my app's performing and so forth. The data requirements are massive and growing. All of the things that it seems Scilla is perfect for, right? Latency, throughput, all that.
Correct.
Companies using Scilla in observability situations
so
that
we are actually playing the two sides for this story because we are a monitor and our own application. So we generate our Scilla cloud deployment generates a lot of metrics, and we also act as a backend to collect metrics, for example, from IoT applications. So Scilla is a very good match to keep IoT information. But we also are customer ourselves because we do generate a lot of metrics, and we are using a stack of Grafana, like everyone else, I guess.
Sure.
To present all of these metrics, and we connect Scilla directly to Grafana in some cases to quickly export all of these metrics and visualize them. Excellent. And by the way, we presented at KubeCon as well. I don't know if you saw our presentation, but we was there as well.
No, they had me stuck in the broadcast booth doing interviews. I was doing 20-something interviews a day there. I never got off from my little area that they had us set in on there. And, it was all over you were there. KubeCon was huge, and I never got to even walk the floor a lot. But hopefully in Detroit, I think it's Detroit in October, November, we'll be back at KubeCon.
Okay.
Maybe we'll
I hope we'll be there as well.
Yep. Did we leave anything else out?
I think we covered the main point. I do want to mention that we are working with a lot of companies, and everything I say is public on our site, so I'm not exposing anything new, but companies like Comcast, Disney, Hotstar, and other who want to reduce latency and save costs with high throughput are increasingly using Scilla because, of course, I'm biased, but that's the only NoSQL database out there that really work with both high availability and high performance. There are many different solutions out there, but this combination, I think, is unique to Scilla.
Agreed. Tzach, I want to thank you for coming on our show. We ran a little over, but that's not unusual here.
Okay.
I hope to see you soon, if not at KubeCon, but as I mentioned, I'll be at Yalla DevOps next week. Maybe if you're in the area, stop by. Wish you well and continued success with Scilla and to all our friends at Scilla.
Thank you very much for having me, and have a safe flight.
Thank you. All right, Scilla DB here on TechstrongTV. Go check the. You know what, Sock? We never gave people the web address. What URL did they go to find out?
ScillaDB.com.
ScillaDB.com. Check it out. We're going to take a break on TechstrongTV. We'll be right back.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, we're back here on the floor at KubeCon, Cloud Native Con, Valencia, Spain, 2022. What a great event. I'm joined now by Kapil Sangavelu. Am I good?
You got it.
Kapil is with Stacklet, and you know what? I'm going to let you introduce yourself and the company, Kapil.
Sure.
Why don't we do that?
Stacklet is a cloud governance as code platform delivered via SaaS that helps companies be well managed in the cloud. And that's inclusive of doing security, doing compliance, doing cost optimizations, all through sort of GitOps delivery, using the open source project Cloud Custodian to power YAML policies that help companies achieve real-time compliance.
Excellent, good stuff. And you are, what's your position there?
I am the CTO and co-founder of the company, and then previously, when I was at Capital One, I helped create the Cloud Custodian project and open source it, and now bring it into the CNCF, where it is in the sandbox.
And Capital One is, look, my friend Dr. Paul, you know Paul? So, ProCop Paul is, he was at Capital One a long time. But he was one of the ones who really kind of began let's call it their embrace of open source. Right, at a time when a lot of banks would never...
Topo, yes.
Topo, Paul, right.
Yeah.
At a time when banks would never publicly say they even used open source, he was kind of preaching in the wilderness, right, about not only are we going to use open source, we're going to develop open source, and we're going to give the open source to the open source community. And what a great thing, and in many ways, this is like a byproduct of it. Or this is
one realization of that.
Right, exactly. Why don't, if you don't mind, if we got some time,
sure,
talk about that journey.
So, I joined Capital One in 2015 as part of the Tech Fellows program. I was coming from Canonical, makers of Ubuntu Linux, sure, and they were just beginning that cloud journey. They had decided to go all in it, but they were also really passionate about doing open source well, and they wanted to set examples up for the org. So Topo,
right,
Dr. Taprabada, was one of the leading lights for that, and Cloud Custodian being open source in April 2016 was the second project that Capital One had done in that open source fashion. I've been in open source for 20 years, and I've watched it go from that fringe group of hippies on the side to the de facto way all software is built. And so seeing that, when you're doing that, being able to influence that open source, being able to contribute back to it is a key part of both making your own projects better as well as contributing back to the larger community. And I think a lot of banking and some sectors looked at it as secret sauce, but it's not secret sauce. Like, it is undifferentiated lifting from business value, and by contributing back to it, you help influence the direction so that it's better for you.
Love it. All right. So now we come out of Capital One. There's this open source project they've put out there, and you start or co-found.
Well, I actually took a year to work at.
So there's more to the story.
There is a little bit more. So I've been doing open source the last 20 years, and I wanted to ensure the next 20 years of open source. And I saw a lot of companies that were not only open source switching licenses, going to business software licenses, things that no longer met the OSI definition of open source because they prevented against particular fields of endeavor. And I saw the biggest challenge with that was getting the cloud providers themselves to contribute back to projects that they were running as services. So I joined Amazon under Adrian Crockraft at the open source team there, and tried to work with service teams to get them to contribute back and to understand the value for their end customers to contribute back to the upstreams. Did a year of that, and then started Stacklet. It was March 11th. I remember that day well because WHO declared a global pandemic. So born and raised during the pandemic, so to speak.
Wow. Actually, I remember that day as well. So we had done the RSA conference show in California, San Francisco. And after that, we went to Napa for the weekend. Because my anniversary is right around then. I got on a plane coming home and we heard that people at RSA had gotten sick. Because it was kind of not really talking about a lot then. Got home, went to work that Monday. I think we closed the office that Tuesday or Wednesday maybe. And crazy. So,
yeah, my co-founder was visiting me in the Northern Virginia area, and we're like, he lives in Kentucky, and we're like, you should go home because we don't know like what they
if you're going to be able to get home,
like what's going to happen.
Crazy time.
It was crazy time.
At some point, we'll write the history of this time, and having started a company, right in the middle of this pandemic will be a great story and a great learning lesson. But, I also always believe that when things are like that, when the cycles are flowing like that, it's a great time to start a company.
Absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of companies born in the pandemic, it was really just a question of embracing remote. Like we have engineers that live all across the globe, from New Zealand to Europe to North America, South America, and so I think I've seen that trend play out numerous times. I ask any startup around on the floor, where are you guys based? Everywhere is the first answer. So, and I think it also brings a lot of interesting challenges to how you engage with customers, how do you get your message out, and being part and born of the open source community, like that is already part and parcel of how you engage.
Agreed. All right, let's talk about the company, the Stacklet, and the product itself now. This was a great discussion around the other stuff. So, it's not a CN, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth or start up a thing here. Relationship here to the CNCF and the whole community.
So Cloud Custodian has approximately 350 contributors. Stacklet employs several of those contributors, and Cloud Custodian is a CNCF sandbox project looking to go to incubating, hopefully right after this conference.
Let's hope so.
Knock on wood.
Yeah.
It's been a long journey. And then Stacklet takes Cloud Custodian and tries to give people an out-of-the-box business value with it. So delivering a platform that can operate at scale across all of your AWS, GCP, Azure footprint, and then delivering policies as code through GitOps delivery, and then visualizations and reporting. The open source is just a CLI, and so being able to operate that at scale, for many organizations requires staffing up and building out teams for it, and we try to give people that out-of-the-box value so that they can just take advantage of it. And you're
providing a real UX, not just the CLI.
Correct.
So what do you think is more important, that UX or the team's scalability situation?
I think it's
both.
I think it's a couple of different things. So I think to deliver value in the organization, you want to have something that helps visualize the results, but we also deliver policy packs which can cover off on hundreds of different value chains, from security or cost optimization. And then you also want to be able to do the operations at scale, like being able to take something from a CLI to operating at production across thousands of accounts requires some engineering work. And so being able to provide that value to organizations out of the box really just helps accelerate them. And then of course we do all of this policy management through GitOps. So we want to be able to have our infrastructure or policy as code deployed the same way that you do infrastructure as code. So being able to run that same process, being able to do stage rollouts to different environments, all through the same techniques that you run any of your application or infrastructure development.
Love it. Kapil, I want to stop you for saying goodbye today, man.
Thank you,
have
Alan.
a great,
Been great
time here at Cloud Native Con, KubeCon. You know, Stacklet, what's the website?
Stacklet.io.
Stacklet.io. Check it out. We're going to take a break here in Valencia. We'll be right back with another guest in just a moment.
This is TechstrongTV.
Hey everyone, we're back here live at RSA. We are at Broadcast Alley, it's Moscone West, and it's been it's day 3 of RSA, so it's been a pretty busy week. You know, I'm pleasantly surprised with the amount of people here. It's been really great. Our next guest is Mr. John Pierce of NetEnrich. Before we get into the whole NetEnrich story though, let's go over John's background a little bit, because we had a nice chat off camera, and I wanted to share that with you, and then we can talk about NetEnrich. John, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I've been in security for about 22 years. I started off at the CIA, was very thankful and fortunate to work there. Worked for a lot of different security companies in threat research and product management. Had the opportunity to write 3 books, and most of them collaborating with a lot of my good friends in the industry. And that's kind of where I'm at. To me, I look at security like playing Xbox. So.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the books. They're still available?
Yeah, they're still available. So the first one is Cybersecurity and Espionage. I wrote with my buddy Will Garagio. The second one, I said I would never write a book again, but I'm like, you know what, I'm going to do it. So we wrote a book called Black Hatonomics, and that's actually after you get hacked, money laundering, and all that other stuff. And then we were doing a bunch of studying when I was at the end of my tail career at HP, going to NSS Labs on threat forecasting. So I got really involved in that, and my last book was on threat forecasting. And it ended up having to have a few buddies come and help me finish it because I was on a deadline. But that's it. I'm done with the books. But it was a lot of fun.
You're never done with the books. Never say never. Never say never. NSS Labs, that was my friend. I had friends there.
Oh, Vic?
It was good stuff.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Anyway, so now that's who John is. Let's talk a little bit about Enrich, though.
Yeah, NetEnrich is a great company. No, they've been around for 14 plus years. Started out as a digital ops company, and then most recently, have gotten into security with releasing the Resolution Intelligence platform.
Excellent. And what do you do at NetEnrich?
Yeah, so I'm VP head of product. So basically, when you look at product managers, you're like a piñata. People will
banging you until you pop.
You pop, and then candy comes out. Everybody's happy. Then it goes back in. So my job is really to productize features, work with partners, and take ideas from our CTO Praveen or Chris Morales, and kind of making some of their big ideas innovative, and bringing those into the market.
Great. All right, let's dig in now.
Cool.
So you gave us the NetEnrich story and where they play. Specifics on the product, can you jump on that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the biggest thing with Resolution Intelligence is basically doing situational analysis. So you have a plethora of threat detection technologies that are out there. So essentially what we do is we have the opportunity to hook into a massive data lake, like Chronicle as an example. And what we're able to do is a lot of sense making from a situational perspective. But what's really good about that is we kind of do scoring, right? So 0 to 100, 100 being the devil, it's bad. But essentially we're looking at likelihood. How likely is this threat, to my organization? Second thing is looking at impact. What type of impact is this going to have? And then, lastly is, the confidence and probability that that's going to happen. So we're able to layer that not only just for one customer, but we work with partners. So it's highly multi-tenant. So you can look at all partners or you can go down. But what I gave you is the situation. So when you have the situation, you don't know what the context is. Is it good? Is it bad?
Sure.
So that's the biggest thing, is really bringing rich context into that. That helps an analyst really focus and understand what they're doing. In addition to that, using machine learning, we're able to automate a lot of tier one analyst tasks which is great. It saves a lot of time, and it really allows, he or she to really dive down into things that matter. So that at the highest level is what we're doing with resolution intelligence and really going inside out, because, understanding all the businesses that we had to work for, understanding how important assets are, right? And, when you look at assets, you can look at, your your iPad, it's a blast radius, right? Like, what other things can I get from there? And that's, just one aspect of what resolution intelligence can provide.
And you're doing this all with, what do you want to call it, ML or AI? But I mean, you're bringing together these disparate parts with some automated analysis machine.
Correct. Yeah.
Call it machine learning.
It is all machine learning. Obviously training those models. We have the ability to map it down to MITRE, right? So the tactic and the technique, which is important. And what that does also is you're able to look in these different, the MITRE categories, which there's a whole bunch of them, but you're able to understand, what you have for that specific threat. Do you have that coverage? And I think that's kind of important, because when you look at security as well, you have to look at the economics. It's not cheap.
No.
Right. Yeah. So what this allows you to do is it paints that picture. So, maybe you can go back to the CFO. I'm missing this security control or that security control. So yeah, a lot of stuff going on there.
Absolutely, man. You know what we didn't mention? For people who are interested in NetEnrich, where do they go?
Netenrich.com.
Netenrich.com. That's NETENRICH.
Correct. Yeah.
.com. And how's the product kind of distributed, sold, packaged?
That's a good product question.
Well, for the product manager, I thought it'd be a good question.
Yeah. So essentially, our target market is really looking at working with partners. So your MSPs, your global SIs, and helping enable them to really have that visibility, to their customers. So that's the biggest thing. I mean, globally. So, North America, EMEA, APAC, LATAM. I mean, we're focused on wherever our partners are. And the good thing is we partner with Google Chronicle as well, which is a great thing as well. So
very cool. John, what do you think about RSA this year?
Well, yesterday I probably clocked in 10 miles walking around, and it keeps getting more and more each time I come back here. This is my 17th time at RSA, and what's funny is I remember over there it was like half of the event center. Right now it's sprawled out all over the place. So
you and me both.
Yeah. But it's been good just in terms of, you see all these different themes that are playing out, right? Like I've been hearing a lot about zero trust.
All right.
Jinx.
Bing, bing, bing. All right. That was the first time we mentioned it in this interview. Good. All right.
Yeah.
We made it 10 minutes. Okay.
Yeah. That I've seen XDR.
Yeah. XDR is hot.
Yeah.
That's another hot one.
Analytics.
Software supply chain.
That's been a big, and if you look at, I won't mention the companies, but the companies that got hit, that's become mainstream. And
that's bombs, baby.
Yeah. Yeah. But you do have a lot of customers now that are asking about supply chain, right? And I think it is important.
All kidding aside, I was just going to say, all kidding aside, it is important.
Yeah.
It is, we're DevOps.com. We put on a big DevSecOps event here every year. We did yesterday in Moscone. And it was all about software supply chain. So very interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, hey, John, thanks for joining with us, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure to meet you.
Check it out. We're going to take a break here at RSA. I think we have some more people coming up right behind. This is John Pierce from NetEnrich. We'll be right back.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
Yeah. So on that same tone, on that same topic, what do you do to balance yourself?
My grounding is going to the gym in the morning. So 5 o'clock, I'll get up. I can say it, I've got kids, I'm sure other people have nothing to hide about that. So I get up before they're awake. And then I go and ground myself at the gym. And then I feel refreshed and I'm ready. And I've obviously at that point probably had pre-workout, so I'm caffeinated up. So when I come back at 7:38, I'm ready to kill the day. I start work around 9:30. So I've already spent time with my kids in the morning, done my gym for me to keep me sane. And then started to prepare, because how I manage it all is to really plan my day. And I do that before I actually start work. So what are the things I want to achieve, maybe for the week, or what are the key things I need to do for that day? Then I start work, and then, lunch, and I need to get out. So, one of my hobbies is gym and just doing walks. And then in the evening, it will be content. And I do find that if I haven't gone to the gym in the morning, just to ground myself, that my whole day is out of whack.
Yeah, during the pandemic, one of the things that I did in lockdown in London was go to Waltham Abbey's Park and walk every day. And that's where I picked up walking. But I'm going to call you out on something, man. So I was on a clubhouse meeting, and you were on the meeting from the gym. Yeah. So that is a good. So what I do sometimes is when I haven't done my steps in the afternoon, I have to go to the gym in the evening and do my walk. Yeah. So I hit 13,000 steps a day. I have to, because I sit at this desk and I'll probably stay here the whole day. So I'm like, hey, at lunchtime, I need to get out. But if I don't, then I'm like, hey, man, I'm missing my steps for the day. Don't feel good. And I would do it in things like Clubhouse, right? I'd do it in the evening. Yeah, I remember a couple of the talks we had, meetings on Clubhouse, and you were calling from the gym. And I was like, man, this dude is like a gym rat, religiously. So some of the stuff
I used to be, and I can tell that I'm not now.
Really? The second workout.
Yeah. So it's the second workout, right? So I do my first workout in the morning, which is my weights and grounding. I wouldn't say yoga, but more stretching and really trying to engage while the world is asleep. Mm-hmm. And then my second workout is my steps. So we're walking around. I don't really want to go 11 o'clock at night on the street because I can't see shit around here. So I go to the gym and then just go on a treadmill and walk.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's a lot of places in London to actually do a lot of really cool walking. And that's where I got kind of grounded and started learning balance was while I was in the UK. And one of the things that I realized is that physical exercise does help a lot, because it releases endorphins, and those endorphins relax you and really get you focused. So the physical aspect of it, I think, is really important. And on another note, how I balance myself as well and maintain, being social is having people on the podcast and, meeting new people and learning about them. And I always learn something for myself every time I interview somebody. But I think that social aspect is really important, because through the pandemic, we've lost some of that social ability, I think, because we've been isolated for so long. And I think it's important to see faces and actually have a conversation. Working from home 24/7, I don't get a lot of that. So I rely on you people to help me with the podcast and that social interaction. So where do you see yourself, man, in the next 5-10 years?
That is a really good question. So I want to, and going on this topic about giving value, I want to take my knowledge and share it further, whether that's creating a book or a course or something to the masses. I want to do more speaking events. I've got inspiration for you to do schools. I already thought about doing more universities, but really giving that knowledge back. In terms of like a technical base, I reckon I'll still keep on track with like new things that are coming out, but I'm really not that focused on, building out a whole portfolio of certs, which I already have, but I don't feel like I need to extend that any further. I think what you're doing and you're volunteering, maybe something towards that, really sharing that value and giving back. Because and this is what seeded me to this point where I'm giving value is maybe about 7 years ago, right? I had a really bad experience with unsupportive managers in a workplace. So InfoSec at that time, for me, it was like, no one wants to tell you anything. You're really competing with your peers. They don't want to share anything with you. And it was lonely. It was like, I'm Googling things, but I don't know if this makes sense because you don't know what you don't know. And I always said to myself, if I ever got to a point where I could hear my voice or share my voice, I would inspire the next generation. So that is what seeded Clubhouse, what seeded the YouTube channel. And again, like I don't really care about the money. Tom always takes a piss out of me that the UK doesn't pay well, right? And I'm like, I'm not here for the money. I'm here for the value, right? If I could leave a legacy, right, for the people that I've inspired and also my children as well, that is the ultimate.
Yeah, and that's another purpose for the podcast too, is leaving that legacy, because I bring on people, a mix of people, right? But a good majority of them are people who've been there since the inception of cybersecurity, like Chris Roberts. He and I have been friends for a long time. And Old Guard, we've been around the industry forever. And I think it's important to interview people like that, talk to people like that, to leave that legacy. And so the videos and the podcast kind of serve as that. But let me help you fast track that that wanting to give back. And let me introduce you to one of my friends at Westminster University, Chi, who's a lecturer and just phenomenal. He's the one who brought me into Westminster. And I've done, I think, 3 talks now for Westminster. And it's an excellent group of people, and I think you'll enjoy it. So I'll introduce you to him after the podcast. I'll send you a link. But yeah, I like that idea. And I'm to the point in my career now and in my life where I don't look, when someone asks me, what do you want to do 10 years? Where are you going to be 10 years from now? I don't say, I'm going to manage this, or I'm going to be a CEO or a CISO. No, I'm where you're at. I think that I'm fulfilled where I'm at, and I enjoy what I do. And I think it's just time to give that back to somebody else. And so that when people ask me, what are you going to do? I just tell them I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing because it has a lot of value. So.
And I think we should start telling everybody, because I've had people say, I'm not there yet. I'm not a mentor. I'm not this. And I'm like, if you're one day ahead of somebody else, you're a mentor. Like you can always give back. Yeah.
You don't have to be ahead of anybody to be a mentor.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Some of the best lessons I've learned, and some of the coolest pieces of information and, like, let's say, technical ability, I've learned from people who have gotten into the industry freshly, because it's a fresh set of eyes with a different perspective that I don't have, because, 20 something years in the industry, you get kind of, I don't want to say stuck in your ways, but you're set and your routine set. But when you bring in a younger set of eyes and someone really vibrant and excited to be in the industry, I learn a lot from them. I think it's really cool.
You're old, Mike. I'm just kidding.
I'm very old. I mean, yeah. So along that same line, man, what would you say is your biggest pet peeve about the industry? And my cat's chiming in too as well.
Honestly, I would say that a lot of the security testing that needs to be done is enforced by regulators and legislation. If there was a world where regulators and legislation wasn't there, people wouldn't get their stuff tested. And it goes back to that whole insurance kind of, if no one told you to get insurance, you wouldn't do it. And you see the same for enterprises as well. They're doing this pen test or this red team to check a box.
Right.
It's not because they're trying to be proactive and actually secure them. And then they wonder why they get popped, right? Why APTs come and hit them with ransomware. So I would say that it's really honing down on being proactive about your security. I don't like when I hear that companies have assigned a ransomware budget.
Yes.
Because to me, that's like, well, you're hoping that, and yeah, look at Kim's face. Yeah, I've been there and I've heard that. Yeah, don't worry about this. We got a ransomware budget, and I'm like, seriously? Like, you don't want to do your testing to assure what you've got is secure? No, don't worry. If we get popped that day, we've got a budget.
You got to pay.
Yeah, we got it there, sitting there.
And to tell you the truth, the issue with that, and I totally feel you on this, and this is my passion too, is that I've gone into incident response and dealt with cybersecurity insurance as well as the companies. And when the first question out of the company's mouth and the insurance company is, how much is the ransom? That to me is a failure, because
it's driving their industry.
Well, every incident response that we did last year as a company, we got all of our clients out of the issue without having to pay a ransom. So how much the ransom is irrelevant. And I actually heard an IR company that we were working in tandem with at one point got on the phone and said, okay, so the last communication with the threat actor, the ransom was this. However, it's now 5:00 where they're at, so they're off work, and we won't be able to contact them until the next business day. And to me, that really paints the picture of ransomware has been so successful. They're building companies around these operations, and not just small companies, but large companies.
And another thing, they got ransomware negotiators.
Yes,
which is absolutely ridiculous.
Customer support, yeah. That's one thing I try to get out to like the general public when I'm talking to them too. I'm like, you guys realize, like, you go buy Norton antivirus or whatever. I'm like, the bad guys now have that same platform for them to just go click. So it can be anybody. Like, they don't have to know what they're doing anymore. And it's bad.
We test our malware that we create on those platforms before we ship it out.
Exactly. And that's why, when I mentioned about the red team engagement, why system profiling is so important, because you understand what EDR products they're using, and you'll build a separate environment exactly like that and make sure your malware is bypassing that. I just don't understand why we can't be proactive about security. Why do we need to do it because it checks a box? And
have you met humans?
But this then seeds down to small businesses and consumers. So, we talked about how do we protect them, and it's the whole problem with the industry. Is what I'm seeing is something needs to be done to say, before you have a computer, you need to make sure you've done this. Like, before you get on the road, you need a road, or in the UK, you need a road tax, you need an MOT, right? You need to make sure you have car insurance. If you don't have car insurance, you can't drive. Something along those lines.
I think there should be a test. So in the US, when you buy a gun, you have to go through a background check, which they used to make you wait 7 days to buy the gun after you go in. And I think that it should be the same way with computers. You go to buy a computer.
I was laughing about that. You go into like PC World or Curry's. I don't know if you guys have that there. Curry's or at Walmart, right? You go in there and they're like, yes, we need this done. You need to.
And that's the way it should be. I think that, in order to get onto the internet and get a connection, I think you should have some sort of cybersecurity awareness that the ISP forces you to go through before you can hit connect, before they actually, start up your service. Because I think it's important, not only will it protect that person, but also the assets of the ISP. But seeing people do that and putting that into some sort of implementation is, a pipe dream, because it's all about money. The bottom line in every issue that we have in cybersecurity is money. And you hit it right on the head.
I do think if it was, and I don't know the education system, and if they do this, I'm guessing they do, was more education for those individuals learning about computers or social media. Because if they learn that from an early age, those practices are going to stay with them. So we might see that evolution shift between the next generation or the younger generation coming out, that they naturally are going to be more concerned about security.
Right. The problem is in the US. Go ahead, Kim.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say, like here in the US, it depends on if you're in a city and you have computers, or if you're in a rural area and you're not really, maybe they don't have as many computers, and or whether or not, like, if your entire town isn't really a cybersecurity town, it's not really going to promote it, So,
and the schools don't teach it. The schools absolutely fail when it comes to understanding cybersecurity and conveying it to students ages, from let's say 6th grade down, because I think that that's where it should start and we should focus there. But they don't do that. And half the teachers really don't know the threats that exist and stuff like that. I did an interview with the BBC a couple weeks ago on advert fraud, digital advert fraud. It was on the BBC World Service News Hour, I think. And one of the things that we talked about in our discussion was being able to educate people and at what age and, what goes on, because really the kids nowadays are really getting into hacking and cybersecurity at a very early age because of gaming. I did a documentary on that, late last year for Hacker Hunted. That episode will be coming out sometime soon. I don't know. But it was about gaming and about kids and how organized crime groups and hacking groups groom kids on online gaming to become hackers and to work for them and carry out different types of attacks. So I think that, the ages that we really need to focus is probably 12 and under, honestly, to give them that seed. And it needs to progress and continue throughout their education. But the problem with the US is that our education system is nowhere near the UK's education system. I was really impressed by the amount of talent that came out of the different schools at such a young age in the UK. But yeah, I think that we have a long way to go. And I think my pet peeve currently, I have a few, but I think currently my pet peeve is the fact that as an industry and as speakers, we don't do enough outside of our industry. And we rely on, and I'm guilty of this too. I used to be the same way, going to give talks and, oh, look how smart I am and look what I know. So the wrong people, those people don't give a shit.
That's me. That's what I'm doing.
But that's okay. You're both invited to hack into stuff from my prison bus for me and show off to all the kids and cops and whoever else I can.
I don't know though, Kim, because your idea of electrifying bars inside the bus to help amplify a signal is kind of scary. I'm not okay with that.
I'm learning. Hey, what do you want? Hey, I have creative mind visions,
You're really hitting that supply and demand, going to hack them and then be like, hey,
we can stop now.
Yeah. Cool. I really like your idea of super yacht protection, right?
It works. It works. So if you're interested in that industry, which, to be honest with you, there's room for cybersecurity practitioners in that industry because there's not many. I can hook you up with Pelion Consulting and push you that direction. As a matter of fact, last year in December, I was invited to go to the American Virgin Islands to go give a talk on board a super yacht during a super yacht conference for a week.
Wow.
And unfortunately, I couldn't go because at the last minute, they made it vaccination only, and I didn't have vaccination, so I couldn't go. But it's a really cool industry, and I think you'll really enjoy the technology. It's different technology. It kind of reflects, it resembles, I shouldn't say reflects, it resembles the technology and the stuff that they use within industrial systems, because you have your ship engine and all this stuff. So you get it. Well, we're at the end of our hour, and I'll be honest with you, this podcast has screamed by because it was so nice talking to you, man. Once I connected who you were, I was like, I know this guy. Okay, we're good. But yeah, it's been really interesting, and it's been a pleasure, and it's been an honor to have you on the show, and I really appreciate that.
No, honestly, thank you, for having me. I've enjoyed it just as much as you have, right? You've inspired me. I love the fact that you're doing these talks and you're doing it at schools and stuff. So definitely I'm taking stuff away from it. Appreciate for you guys hosting me and your time here. And thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Any last words?
It's great to have you.
Any last words for the listeners?
Whatever you want to do in life, try harder. Right. Actually, we can cut that.
No, I like that, actually. I like that. Because complacency is one of my biggest pet peeves.
Because, and I'll say why, because I studied for a OSCP, those might know it. But one of the key things I took away from there, which has impacted me for the rest of my life, is the try harder mantra. Like, you were trying to hack boxes and you couldn't get through. And you would go to the admins for support and they would be like, try harder, try harder. So everything I do, I'm like, try harder now. If I want to go record a podcast and don't feel like it, I'm like, in myself, I'm like, fuck it, try harder. Go and do it. Like,
yes.
Failure is not an option. Go and do it. Like, yeah. So I'll say try harder.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, man. And I'm sure that you'll be getting some communication from me to get back on the show at some point, probably pretty soon. Maybe we'll do a podcast with you and Tom Ryan soon. I think
that would be awesome.
Let's do it.
Cool. All right. Well, you guys have a great weekend, and tell all my friends and family over in the UK I miss them. And we'll talk to you guys soon. Have a good day.
I'll end on some air horns.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Have a good one, brother. Thank you.
Bye.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech Conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech Conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech Conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech Conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech Conferences are produced by TechStrong Live and powered by TechStrong Group.
This is TechstrongTV.
And we are back at TechstrongTV live at RSAC. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. Thank you very much for being a part of my day today. We're having so many great conversations here, and I'm about to have another great one with Asaf Kohan, who is the co-founder at a company called Centra. Asaf, thank you so much for stopping by and saying hello and having the conversation with me. Do appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here, Charlene. Thank you.
Excellent. So you are a brand new company. Centra is a brand new company. You guys are based in Tel Aviv, correct?
That's correct.
Excellent. So tell me a little bit about Centra, what it does, how you founded the company, and just any background you want to share.
Super. Thanks, Charlene. So Centra is a relatively young company. We're just under a year on the road.
Very young.
Based upon my previous experience, I was head of Unit 8200 in the Israeli Defense Forces. I came to a few fundamental kind of understandings about what's beneath the surface of the world, how messy it is. And Centra's main mission is to deal with data. We have an extremely data-centric approach. And we really believe that after we studied it, most organizations don't really understand where the data is. Mm-hmm. They don't understand where their valuable and sensitive data is. And another premise that Centra was founded upon is that every organization will be breached and penetrated. So it's not a matter of if you're going to be breached, you have to pre-position yourself and assume that you're going to be breached. So the combination of 100% being breached and knowing where your data and pre-positioning yourself, this is kind of the key foundational layer to Centra.
Right. So is it safe to say you are bringing a level of visibility to the data, or is it more about understanding where the gaps are in your security posture?
So the first is correct.
Okay.
Centra is basically and fundamentally about discovering and understanding data, classifying data, and being able to put light on data that organizations don't know they have.
Oh.
We call it shadow data. Again, this is something I'm deeply and profoundly, I believe in, that most organizations have data that they don't even have a clue that they have. And this part of Centra, of understanding and revealing the data, would be the first layer of Centra's promise and offering.
Okay. So it's, the idea of data security, or just the topic of data security, it's such a vast topic. We've been talking about data security for a very, very long time, but obviously, especially over the last couple of years, it has become much more important, and companies are paying a lot more attention to the security, not only of their networks, but also of the data and the way that it travels. Have you seen a shift in kind of maybe the messaging around data security as we've kind of lived through the last couple of years and moving forward?
Yeah. I think the major paradigm shift is to do with the movement to the cloud environment.
Sure.
And the collision between cloud technology, cybersecurity, and data is a new space with a new paradigm. So if it would be the on-prem era, it was relatively, I would say, simple to understand where your data is. It was physically locked in a data center with a key. There was a door to the data center. Right. In the cloud, there's no a perimeter. There's actually no perimeter. And you really don't understand where your data is. And the amount of data which you produce, the amount of data which you consume in the cloud, the amount of data which moves in the cloud, makes it incredibly hard to track and to control data. And Centra's mission is to basically enable organizations to regain control over this part.
It seems like such a fundamental thing for organizations to do, but obviously, because of all of the issues that we have seen in the cybersecurity and the data security space, it doesn't seem to be an easy task. So what do you think, this seems like a problem that we should have solved by now, especially with so many organizations moving to the cloud. So why do you think it has taken so long?
Fundamentally, I believe that most of the security establishment focused on what I would call defending the network, putting barracks and lures and trying to pull the perimeter paradigm from the on-prem era to the cloud. Dealing with data wasn't perceived as their job. It was perceived as people's jobs.
Other person's
data
problems,
engineers,
right?
Data engineers and so forth. It wasn't perceived as the key part of the security stack. I think it starts from that part of feeling responsibility for data and understanding that the main mission of security teams is, at the end of the day, to understand and protect the data. It's all about, when there's a breach, it's not the network which is flowing out. It's data which is flowing out. So I think this is a fundamental problem. It wasn't perceived as a key responsibility of security teams, and there was someone else who could be kind of responsible for that.
Yeah.
And that's changing.
Yeah, and that's actually a very, very good point, because I think when we get kind of an understanding, if you will, within the entire security community of what they're really supposed to be protecting, I think we will see a lot more movement in the data security space and a much more embracing of these different technologies to secure data security. But I still feel like we might be early days as far as
very much so. Very much so. I again, profoundly believe that there's a convergence between three different parts of which were siloed in enterprises. The traditional security, which was basically meant to prevent from others getting in and from information leaking out or from stuff going out. The compliance part, taking care of customers' data, which every organization is interested in it, and some are fined if they don't do it.
Right.
And the other part is the ability to do digital transformation. So consume data and create revenue from data. And these three parts are aligning and kind of getting much more interacted together. And it's creating an environment whereby security teams are not longer just responsible for risk reduction. They have a responsibility to enable organizations who are data-driven to move much faster in order to create more revenue. And they will be accountable for that, and they will be judged on that. And part of it, you can't do it without understanding anything about your data.
That's true. And for so many years, the security of a company was relegated to one department. Now it seems like, not seems like it is. It's everybody's responsibility. So, we talk about the shared responsibility model with cloud services providers, but I really think that mindset should also be within an organization. The fact that everybody has a role to play in securing the data, in ensuring that, they alert the right people if they notice something is off, and so much more. So do you think that we're kind of maybe approaching security I don't want to say incorrectly, but maybe we need to rethink the way that we do approach security in organizations to create a much more security-minded organization as a whole?
Yeah, at the end of the day, because it's all about the data, and the data will be the major source of revenue for organizations. Mark Andreessen a decade ago spoke about the fact that software is eating the world.
Right.
Today it's data and cloud which are eating the world. And in this sense, you have to have a very broad sense of accountability to having a data hygienic environment, responsibility for protecting data. So it's DevOps, it's the business side, it's the compliance side, it's the security. In this sense, it's, again, at the end of the day, you have to have people who are accountable and responsible. These will be the security compliance teams, but it has to be shared responsibility, and they can't do it by themselves. And what Centra basically does, it creates a platform which spills light on the data assets of every organization that everyone can see. And once you see it, you can build a model of shared responsibility.
Yep. If you don't know it's there, how can you protect it, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct,
So-
Charlene. That's correct.
So Centra is part of our DevSecOps days at RSA.
So we're currently, as I said, relatively young. We came to see RSA, so we don't have a booth yet. Next year, we're going to conquer RSA.
Excellent.
But we came to see, we came to network, we came to meet potential customers. We're doing really good here. And for me, it's also on a personal kind of level, it's liberating after two and a half years of COVID to kind of engage in such a vibrant, energetic environment. I think you feel the same. No?
I do. I feel just there's an energy here that we've all been waiting for this for a very long time, and it's nice to see people, from the neck down, because we've been living in a Zoom world for the last 2.5 years, so it's very it's just a lot of fun to actually get.
So I have to remind myself I have to dress properly.
I know, put
beneath
on a pair
my
of
shirt.
pants.
So but it's great, and again, I'm enjoying myself. I'm thoroughly enjoying myself here.
Excellent. Is this your first RSA?
Yeah, it's my first RSA. As I said, I was head of Unit 8200. I was sending people to RSA, but I can participate, and I'm sure it's going to be first of many more RSAs. So
I certainly hope so. Asaf, thank you so much for having the conversation with me about your company. I wish you guys the best of luck, and we'll see you back here next year.
Thank you, Charlene. It's been a pleasure to be here, and all the best.
Excellent.
Great.
All right. So guys, stick around because we've got lots more interviews happening today throughout the day. But for now, we're just going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
This is TechstrongTV.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechstrongTV live at RSAC. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Ritesh Agarwal, who is the CEO and co-founder of a company called AirGap. Ritesh, thank you so much for stopping by and saying hello and having the conversation.
Thank you for having me.
How's the show for you so far?
So very exciting. Like I said before, I'm excited to be out of the house, out of the office, and meet people, see faces. So.
I think we all are. It's been a long time coming, and it's, you can kind of see just the excitement on people's faces, and they get to see people face to face. I spent about 20 minutes with a friend the other night I hadn't seen in about 30 years.
I can imagine.
And the entire time there were people walking up and saying hello, and it was almost like a big reunion. So that's kind of the energy here. I love it. I love it. So tell me a little bit about AirGap.
AirGap is an exciting young company. We started about 3 years ago.
Okay.
And we are trying to solve the most fundamental problems that have not been addressed by anybody in the most elegant way possible for the industry. And we've been inspired by lots of technology that already is available, but not applied to industry that we are addressing to.
Okay.
So exciting journey for us, solving fundamental issues that customers are facing. We have a bunch of customers that are endorsing the product, and we're looking forward to the future.
Excellent. And you're based here in California? Or?
Yes, our office is in Santa Clara.
Okay.
That's our headquarters. Most of our employees are based out of Santa Clara.
Excellent. Excellent. So what problems are you trying to solve exactly?
It's a good question. Let me give you a little bit of a history. Before starting AirGap, I used to be part of a company called Juniper Networks, and I used to run their security business, focusing on large telcos and large enterprises. And what I observed there was there's some fundamental flaws in the network industry that have been started back in 1980s, I would say, since we committed back then, notion of shared infrastructure or a shared network. And what it does, it creates a challenge of one infected device being able to infect other devices.
Right.
So if you look at any breach, it has a footprint of lateral threat movement. For example, if you go to your home and I walk in and say, give me access to your Wi-Fi, please, I'm your friend. And you'd say, sure. But if I told you that I have ransomware on my laptop, you would be uncomfortable giving me access.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason for that is because you worry that my laptop may infect your machines. What I observed also is this is not a problem in the telco world. So as an AT&T subscriber, let's say all of us are AT&T subscribers, and if I told you that my cell phone has ransomware, it shouldn't bother you. It wouldn't bother you. Millions of subscribers on AT&T or Sprint or Vodafone or Deutsche Telekom or Telefonica, they don't worry about lateral threat movement or spread of ransomware. Enterprises do. What is that they're doing differently? What if we could make the same thing available to enterprises? How well it would be secured? That's the genesis of the thought process that started AirGap. That's what AirGap is all about.
That is a fascinating thought.
Yeah.
Because I had never really thought about it that way. I actually kind of cut my teeth in telecom, and then I moved into networking, and I actually covered Juniper Networks.
Oh, I see.
A while ago.
I see.
But yeah, nobody ever brought that up. It's like we don't really think about the data breaches and the exfiltration of data over telecom networks.
That's right.
So what is it really that is so different between those networks that it just doesn't happen?
Oh, how much time do we have?
Oh, well,
I could spend the whole day on that one. But let me summarize it for you. First of all, I truly believe that often the best ideas are right in front of you, just fail to look at them. I was fortunate enough to sell to telcos in my previous career, to sell to large enterprises and be able to understand not only the outcomes that are different, but also the technology and how they're deployed and how they're consumed. So that gave me the confidence and the knowledge to build what we are building right now. But in terms of differences, to answer your question, I'm going to keep it very simple. When you take yourself an AT&T subscription, for example, when you walk out of that store, you don't turn around and ask the employee, oh, by the way, where is a DHCP server? Where is a DNS server? Where is a firewall? Where is a NAC? Where is IP address management system? And hundreds of other technology that you need to keep the organization functional. You take it for granted that AT&T would provide you that, or any telco would provide you that. You don't wonder ever that if I signed up 2 of my kids or family members, will AT&T be able to scale? You take it for granted. So getting services, you're getting scale. You never worry about mobility. You can travel across the globe and AT&T's got you covered.
Right.
You never worry about pricing. You get $40 a month or $20 a month, whatever your plan is, and you're getting all of that. You're getting mobility, you're getting scale, you're getting services, you're getting reliability, and you're getting pricing that is just cheap. a CIO is spending a lot more than $20 a month. I promise you that.
Yeah.
Are they getting more scale? I don't think so.
Mhm.
They have to build their services, so they're not getting services. Are they getting more security? I don't think so. Are they more reliable, like the CIO networks? I don't think so. So there is a fundamental difference between how telcos consume the network versus how the enterprises do. And you would be surprised to hear this. And with your telecom background, you're not going to be so surprised. But they buy the same set of router, switch, and firewall that enterprises do. And I can assure you that because I sell it to them. I sold it to them earlier. I also will tell you that telcos for their subscriber network buys $0 in security. Now, many of the telco folks probably would argue with me all day long, but if you compare that with the enterprise spend on security, it's dismal. And that's the reason they're able to give you a $20 per month subscription plan.
Right.
Because if they were to buy all the security that you see the RSA here, they couldn't afford $20 a month. So, but the innovation that telco has is what drives the security, the scale, and all of the advantages I told you. When I thought about air gap, for any entrepreneur, this is dream come true because you can see an opportunity right in front of you. What if I could make all of the advantages that I described about telco available to enterprise and do it in a way that is 100% SaaS, meaning enterprises do not have to change anything. They don't have to buy a new switch, router, firewall, or security appliance or anything for that matter. And you would get all of the advantages of telco as a software. And so that's essentially the difference between telcos and enterprises. I'll love to go into more technical details. I'll let you decide how deep you want me to go.
Well, I mean, we can certainly go a level deeper.
Okay, yeah. So, look, the fundamental flaw that I mentioned earlier is really the notion of shared network.
Okay.
And these are VLANs and these are subnets. And they made sense in 1984. Cisco and Nortel actually came up with that. The idea was to reduce the broadcast domain. And somehow we've stopped innovating on switching. We are building enterprises like we built in 1984, as if nothing has changed. Now, if you roll back the clock, some of us are old enough to kind of at least have some inclination or some knowledge of that. But you would see that there used to be servers that are probably bigger than this desk. There used to be file servers that would be sitting next to you. It made sense for you to have shared network. Cybersecurity was probably not even a notion at the time. The world is completely different, right? We are all connected right now. We have Apple Watches and we have thermostats and all of these Wi-Fi devices. We need to do something new. I think as an industry, we have done a poor job innovating on the switching and the networking side in the last couple of decades. The telco architecture, on the other hand, is purely routed architecture. So, the difference between switching and routing is switching doesn't scale and routing does.
Right.
The whole internet works on routing. It is reliable by definition. It's scalable by definition. We rely on it for mission critical stuff now. If you could snap your finger and magically turn your switch network to routing network, you would get all the benefits. And that magic is what air gap is all about.
Okay.
It's literally a snap of your finger. We give you, in less than an hour, we would convert your enterprise into a routed enterprise. No change in IP addresses, no change in your switch router firewall configuration. It is super easy.
Wow.
It is, some of the investors that we have and some of the advisors we have, they tell us that this is first principle innovation in networking that they have not seen in a long time. So
it's certainly kind of mind blowing to think about it because, to your point, it's right in front of your face.
That's
I mean,
right.
it's like kind of one of those smack my head moments. It's
That's
like,
right.
why didn't I think of this? And
That's
so,
right.
kudos to you for thinking about it. That's
much.
really, really awesome.
Yeah.
So, you guys have a couple like updates to features in your product, right?
Yep.
So that you've announced here at RSA, I should say.
That is
So
right.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So in addition to providing all of the benefits that I described to you at a high level, we have a strong position to prevent enterprises from getting infected with ransomware.
Okay.
One of the biggest problem in the enterprise is lateral threat movement, and ransomware likes to move laterally. So it obviously behooves us to build a solution that not only stops lateral threat movement, but also addresses the ransomware menace that the enterprises are facing at the moment. As a result, we have two key features in ransomware that are very unique and our customers are super excited about. One is appropriately named as ransomware kill switch.
Oh.
And the idea really is, if you as a CIO, for example, of a large organization, pick a name, get infected with ransomware today, you get an alert or somebody from your team comes to you saying, Charlene, we have ransomware in the organization. Often enough, many of the CIO audience or CISO audience that may be on this channel, they would scramble. And I have had conversations with so many of those. They would say we would shut down the network, we'd start yanking the cables. And I said, I'm not sure if you want to do that. What if it's a false alert?
Yeah.
What if you're managing a Google campus? Yanking cables would take months, if not longer, right? And then don't even think about putting them back in. That would take years for you to build it back up. So it's not a feasible approach.
Mm-hmm.
A ransomware kill switch provides a surgical way for you to selectively and surgically shut down services that are important to you, that may be participating in ransomware, and so on and so forth, and hence stop the propagation of ransomware.
Very cool.
And then the second feature that we announced to complement ransomware kill switch is the idea of ransomware early detection.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of companies are working on ransomware detection. We are taking an approach of very simple thinking of what are the key top 3 or 4 traits of ransomware that are common across majority of them. And then we have built a specific solution that would detect it early, and then in conjunction with ransomware kill switch, which only AirGap can offer, prevent the ransomware spread. So it becomes a holistic solution for our customers.
Well, that's great. That is great. So tell me a little bit about your customer profile. Are you working mostly with larger enterprises or medium enterprises, or what does your average customer look like?
I'm going to give you a bad answer, actually.
Okay.
The technology that we have is so exciting that it's applicable to a wide variety of customers. It's very difficult for me to choose which customer to pick because everybody wants a solution like us. So in a set of customers that we have global 500 companies, and we have a small manufacturing shop.
Oh, okay.
And a combination. We have banks, we have healthcare, we have government organizations, and we have construction companies, we have biomedical labs, we have hospitals. They are our customers. These are the companies that are operating mission critical infrastructure that cannot be compromised with ransomware or lateral threat movement. These are forward-looking individuals that are trying to solve the problem. These are the customers that are looking for compliance, that are customers that are looking for cyber insurance.
Mm-hmm.
With AirGap, it becomes really, really easy to get cyber insurance and possibly save some dollars on cyber insurance as well, because we are able to segment every device. So that's, like I said, bad answer because we have customers
not at all.
the board.
Not at all. I love that because it shows that your technology really is applicable to any size organization in any vertical, and it being a SaaS-based application, really, why wouldn't you do something like that and to use that technology? And with the proliferation of ransomware these days, it really does behoove any size organization to have some sort of technology that will help them mitigate any ransomware or even thwart any ransomware attack. So great stuff. I'm very, very impressed by it.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
So do you guys have a booth here at RSA? I know you're taking part in our DevSecOps days, correct?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But
great.
we don't have a booth right now.
Okay. All right. Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, tell me how folks can get in touch with your company if they're interested in learning more.
Absolutely. I'll give my personal email address as well. It's ritesh@airgap.io, RITESH@airgap.io. Our website is airgap.io.
Okay.
You can find more information, download some solution briefs and technical information. But I welcome one-on-ones with customers and prospects, advisors, investors, whoever wants to talk to us. I'm at ritesh@airgap.io.
All right, great. Well, Ritesh, thank you so much for taking a couple minutes talking to me about your technology. It's so great to see you in person at RSA, and I wish you guys the best of luck.
Thank you so much, Charlene. It's been a pleasure being here.
Thank you. All right, everybody, we are chock full of more interviews coming up throughout the day. So I hope you can stick around. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and TechStrong.tv.
This is TechstrongTV.
I have the great pleasure to be joined by Yanni Shohat. Yanni is CEO and co-founder of Valence Security. Welcome, Yanni.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Great to have you here. First, let's have you tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about Valence as well.
Sure. So Valence is the second cybersecurity starter I'm starting after serving in the Israeli intelligence forces in various cybersecurity roles, focusing on securing basically SaaS applications and data connectivity. So what Valence helps organizations is secure what we call the SaaS mesh, this network of interconnectivity that is established through APIs, third-party integrations, OAuth tokens, and different no-code, low-code workflows that allow different third-party vendors to gain access to our core SaaS applications like Microsoft 365, Salesforce, and others. And our platform helps organizations detect and secure this mesh of interconnectivity by applying zero trust principles on it.
Tell us a little bit about you too. You said you were in the intelligence service, served in the military. Do you have any specialty that you focused on there?
When you show up in the Israeli intelligence forces, a lot of it also stays confidential and stays with you. But afterwards, I really started my first startup focused on industrial IoT cybersecurity called SCADAfence. And I've been there for several years. Afterwards, I really embraced my new journey, focusing on Valence and shifting towards more cloud and SaaS applications. But I've been in the cybersecurity industry for the past, I think, almost 15 years. And from the beginning of my career, I've been entirely focused on security and understanding the risks and how to help organizations improve their security posture when it comes to modern digital threats.
Fantastic. Well, we'll talk about a prime opportunity, prime time for SaaS applications, low code, no code, automation through all kinds of tools. Many organizations have accelerated their use of 365 and Team and Slack and you name it. A different cloud service for general productivity use as well as specific applications. So that attack surface, they don't stand alone, right? We may use those apps, but we're constantly integrating with them, tying together, doing automation. At least I am. I know that's part of my role in doing that. I'm sure you find that a lot too. Do you have any kind of perspective on the market about the security risks that poses?
Yeah, so I think you're exactly right. Eventually, when we think about the shared responsibility model that we share with these SaaS applications that we purchase, the SaaS vendor is in charge of their platform and the security of their own infrastructure. But once we get access to their platform and we start to configure it, it's our responsibility on how we secure our identities, our data, and our most critical business applications and processes. And with the growing use and adoption of SaaS applications, there's a lot of benefits in interconnecting these different applications. For example, for us, even as a young company, we have our Salesforce connected to HubSpot, connected to Gong, and we have our GitHub that's connected to our Jira, that's connected to our Slack. We have Calendly that's connected to Zoom, connected to Google, and all these different types of integrations are started to establish and creating this network effect of how you can not only utilize a platform or a SaaS applications, but how you can leverage force multiplier of connecting them together and establishing the automated workflows and data flows that allow you to save time, save money, and run a much more efficient and productive organization. And these types of processes are eventually established, usually when it comes to SaaS, using API-based integration between these platforms. And it creates a lot of benefits, but also challenges, because eventually security attackers and adversaries identify this as the weakest link when it comes to securing these applications, because even if you put multi-factor authentication and you strengthen your ability to strong authentication and authorization within these platforms, eventually if you authorize a third-party vendor and they're breached, you're as secure as that third-party vendor. And a typical organization can have hundreds, if not thousands, of these third-party integrations. And it's very difficult to ensure that all of them are properly secure in your standards and how you expect your organization to be secure.
I'm curious, we're talking about API access into the services, doing integration, doing automation. There's us building things that utilize the APIs of those services, of those SaaS services, et cetera. There's also third-party service like a Zapier, to pick one, an easy one, right? It's doing the integration and helping us. Do you consider that also services like that as part of this fabric that presents this kind of a expanded attack surface?
Yeah, so I think all these basically hyper automation or no-code local platforms like Zapier and Workato and Microsoft Power Platform and others, they create a lot of indirect connectivity. From a security standpoint, if I have Jira and let's say Monday connected to a Zapier and it's connected and it's creating some kind of an interconnected workflow between the two, maybe from a security standpoint, they look at each platform separately and I see only a connection to Zapier. But in fact, what's happening is that there's an indirect data flow or transitive data flow between these two platforms. Now, maybe that's a flow that I can accept, and that in terms of the data that's flowing out and data flowing in, it's approved from a security governance standpoint. But once you have dozens or hundreds of these data flows configured in one of these robust integration platforms as a service, it eventually can create an exposure to the organization in terms of how is the data flowing between these platforms and whether or not it's approved in terms of what platform are receiving these types of data sets. So for example, the easiest example is always PII. If I'm taking PII out of the platform and I'm pushing it to a different platform, I need to ensure I have the proper mitigation steps and the proper coverage in terms of whether or not that additional platform can accept, process, and store PII on my behalf. And if I don't follow all these different data flows and how all these integrations are made, I could have different exposure, both from a regulatory perspective, but also in terms of just sending data to the wrong recipient. We've seen a lot of misconfigurations in these platforms because eventually they're configured by citizen developers. It's not the classic engineering software development organization is configuring them, but it's more decentralized and managed by these citizen developers.
And it's what I've experienced too is with these tools, it's an all or nothing authorization token that you get to do this integration. You could be doing 1,000 use cases, all related or unrelated, and growing at their own pace, and who knows what's happening inside of that integration. So one integration can mean your whole business and hundreds of functions that are operating on that. So it gets complex very fast. But I know you've done some research, some surveying, talking to CISOs. Tell us a little bit about some of the findings in this area.
Yeah, so since we're a startup focused on this problem space and we're talking with a lot of customers about it and we're trying to understand what's the perception about the market, we've realized after speaking with hundreds of CISOs that eventually there's a certain perception about this market, which is usually lack of visibility and lack of understanding of how big of a scale this problem is within organizations. And once we connect to an organization and they onboard our platform, they get a lot of visibility into the problem space that contextualizes how big is their risk surface. And in order to kind of highlight how big the perception versus reality is, we surveyed a group of CISOs based out of the US to better understand how many integrations they think they have, how often do you think they're actually being used, how often or what's the pace of adding new integrations into the organization, the adoption of no-code, low-code, and then we compare that to the actual results we see from live tenants, just to highlight how big of a difference there is between the perception and the reality of these environments, and to help organizations or encourage organizations to ask these questions, such as, what's connected to my Microsoft 365, what's connected to my Salesforce, what's connected to my Slack, and whether or not the organization has proper governance, documentation, and compliance of all these different SaaS to SaaS third-party integrations. And these procedures are today missing in a lot of organizations, and that's what surveys eventually designed to highlight for organizations, kind of a awareness and a thought leadership piece that will help organizations in breaking that question of how does my SaaS mesh look like? What type of risks do I have incorporated in these third-party integrations?
Now, does it also help with the integrations you don't know about, the APIs that folks are using? You may have view into your own department, maybe it's inside or outside of IT, but this is often happening all over the organization, if not everywhere.
Yeah, so what we're seeing is that IT is going through a decentralization process where a lot of the decisions that used to be centrally managed by IT are now managed by end users, business owners across the board within the organization. Mm-hmm. So we have the Salesforce administrator that may be in the marketing or sales group. We have a Workday administrator in the HR group. We have a lot of different administrators that are located within the organization. And once the IT is going through a decentralization process, security also needs to realize how it can go through a decentralization process to allow proper visibility detection and response in a decentralized organization. And one of the challenges is that IT or security may think that they have a certain risk surface, but they're not aware of things that their users have consented on behalf of the organization, because everybody can get this type of pop-up, do you consent for this and that to gain access to your data, to your privileges. And a lot of users happily click I agree because they have actual productivity benefits from that, but they don't think about the concerns or the risks that are associated with whether or not this vendor is approved. They go through the proper security questionnaires and whether or not this type of vendor should be used within the context of the scope of the organization. So the ease of creating new integrations creates a lot of blind spots for CISOs and security teams because they don't know what they don't know that's connected into their environment. And this is probably one of the major reasons that we see such a difference between what CISOs assume they'll have compared to what they actually have.
And I know from just the experience too that oftentimes those agree to interconnect is often done with the user's account, right? And so Who knows what happens when they move on, they change departments, whatever. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about, I'd love to hear more about Valence, and you obviously work in this space and bringing all your expertise, current and past. How do you approach this problem?
Yeah, so what we help organizations eventually manage a decentralized process of remediation within the organization. So we've realized that after we connect to the core SaaS applications of organizations and we highlight the risks, the biggest piece that is missing for security teams is not a better tool to find more risks, but the missing business context that just doesn't exist in the platform. Because if I go into or connect to someone's Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace, and I show that, for example, Calendly is connected, maybe it should be connected, maybe it shouldn't, but the security team just doesn't know. And what's missing is the business context that only the business users and the end users actually know. And what we help organizations is, besides detecting their SaaS mesh and understanding how everything is interconnected, is also to execute at scale remediation workflows that allow to engage with the end users, collect their business justifications, business context, and continuously validate the actual need in order to help remediate unnecessary or risky integrations and configurations based on the continuous engagement with the actual business. So it's trying to apply the same methods for security remediation workflows, such as the business is already applying for onboarding new SaaS applications.
How do you, I assume you also work with the developer part of the organization. So it's both citizen, SaaS tools as well as app integration with developers. Is there a difference with how you work with engineering resources versus citizen developers, or it's basically the same approach?
So it's similar approaches. I think that it's always important to meet users where they are. So if a user is very used to using Slack instead of emails, for example, so it doesn't help if you email them about a notification, they'll probably never read it. So it's very important for the organization to adopt their workflows to how the organization operates. So maybe it's less whether if it's developers or citizen developers, but more about the culture of the organization. If it's a tech-focused organization and it has a certain set of SaaS applications, it may work in one way, but if it's more of a traditional organization that has a different set of SaaS applications, maybe it will operate in a different way. So it really depends on the culture of the organization, how it tries to enable innovation within the company.
Excellent. Well, by the way, where are you in your kind of product life cycle? You've been around for a couple of years. You have product and market, I assume, and general availability. Or are you still in a kind of early access? Where are you in your life cycle of where you are roadmap wise?
Yeah, so we're in the general availability mode. We already have multiple customers using our platform worldwide. And we've utilized a lot of these different use cases across the board with a few dozen SaaS applications. And then it really showed how the organizations can define policies and apply them at scale when it comes to securing and remediating SaaS risks. So it's something that they already have proven. So definitely general availability. We have presence, engineering and product development presence in Israel, and our go-to-market team is based out of the US. And definitely seeing more and more requirements and requests for these types of solutions.
And are you a SaaS yourself? Or are you open source, on-prem, or on the cloud? But what software? What's your solution?
We're pure SaaS. We need to eat our own dog food. Eventually, we're happy to secure SaaS applications, but we're very focused, of course, on securing our customers' data and privileges, and we're SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, and we've invested from the early get-go in compliance and security best practices to ensure that we earn the trust of our customers over time.
Yeah, I remember this is going back a ways when we first introduced intrusion prevention and detection and vulnerability scanning and management. The first aha was just what was going on and how much of it was going on, I think, for security organization. Similar effect with when you run your product, or they're different in other sort of aha moments?
Yeah, so I think the biggest aha moment usually when a customer connects is the scale of their exposure through third-party integrations. Most organizations just don't realize how big of a problem they have and how many of these integrations were set up in the first place. In our survey, for example, we found that the CISOs underestimate the number of SaaS third-party integrations they have by 4 to 5 times. So the average number was less than 200, where in fact we see almost 1,000 integrations in place within the organizations, almost 5 times the number of assumed or estimated by CISOs.
That's scary. So how do you find out about all this stuff? I mean, I can imagine in a network that we managed, we could put a device and kind of watch traffic ingress and egress go out and see what's happening. How do you do this in this world of completely distributed applications and SaaS? And maybe I don't even use VPNs for a lot of this for my end users.
Yeah, so eventually how we imagine the modern network, it's in the cloud between SaaS applications. A lot of modern organizations don't even have an on-prem environment. Therefore, we identify the core SaaS applications, the business critical ones, that we connect to them, and through discovering their configurations and activity logs, we can find out to the edge of the mesh what type of third-party integrations exist and what other vendors are connected to these core SaaS applications.
You can imagine, start with your email, start with your collaboration, start with your CRM. Some of those, many things are going to interconnect with those.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. Well, very cool. It seems like a great space to be in, and wish you much success. Hope you'll come back and kind of keep us up to date when new things happen, and maybe share some more data. I imagine if you do additional surveys, where can folks either go find the report that you referenced, and I'm sure you have some resources, some goodies they can find on your website?
Sure, yeah. So our report is available on valencesecurity.com. So it's VALENCE security.com. And we also offer for organizations today a free assessment to help understand their own risk surface and to do this type of initial risk analysis to understand what's their risk surface and whether or not or how they should basically tackle this type of problem space to make it more contextualized, more real, and to contextualize more of this threats that we're trying to highlight through the report.
Sounds really interesting. I think I'm going to check it out. Thanks a lot. Well, I appreciate having you on, Yanni Shohet. Yanni is CEO and co-founder of Valence Security. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Mitch.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is TechstrongTV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with John Gunn, who's the new CEO for Token, and they just raised some funding. And they have a ring that you use for authentication, and it's kind of part of the whole zero trust model in the world, but it's a different approach. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be on the broadcast with you.
So how does this ring work and what's involved? And, are people using that instead of, say, the Green Lantern ring, or how does this all come together?
I'm not familiar with the Green Lantern ring. I don't think that's used in cybersecurity, but there are a ton of people already protecting themselves. When you think about an enterprise or a business, it's all about keeping the bad guys out. And the bad guys are incredibly sophisticated today. These are nation states. China and North Korea attacking us. They are incredibly sophisticated criminal operations, billion-dollar operations that are attacking businesses. And you read about the devastation they cause in headlines, and not just cybersecurity headlines, but Wall Street Journal, New York Times. And so we're transforming the way companies protect the front door. There's still the connection to the internet, but this is where employees, log in. And with so many companies switching to having a larger number of employees remote, it makes it that much more difficult. So we have this innovative solution to really change the game in that area.
So how does it work exactly? I mean, is this some sort of Bluetooth connection between the ring and the system, or is there some other way? Or, what's the underlying tech?
Yeah, it's a combination of 3 or 4 different technologies. Actually, there's about 20 in the ring, but it's primarily NFC. So if we look at standard access, for years and years, it's been username and password. And that's, I think it was first used in the 1960s. So here we are 60 years later. Some people rely on that. Really bad idea. Companies have stepped up and said, let's get a better form of authentication. So sometimes when you log into your bank, say on a new device, it'll say, we want to send you an SMS code. And it will send you a PIN, and you'll have to enter that because hopefully only you have your phone. That's still not very secure. And then you keep stepping up to levels of security. So we kind of gave this huge boost to this highest level of security, where the information that the computer uses to verify you is kept on the ring, so nobody else can access it. Only you have it. Only you can use the ring. Every other method of authentication has been hacked. Some it takes more work than others, but they get hacked. We believe the ring is, we don't want to say unhackable because people always want to prove it wrong. But we think we're about as close to unhackable as you can get, because your seed or the secret that identifies you is on that ring. It has no access to the internet, so hackers can't get to it. And only you can use it. It uses your fingerprint. When you put the ring on, it reads your fingerprint. It only fits your finger. It only has your fingerprint, and then only you can use it. So all the other methods that have been improved that are still failing. I'll give you an idea. There's a industry report. It's called the Verizon Data Breach Incident Report. But it's really a group of 50 plus companies that share all their data. Year after year, the number one cause of breaches, which lead to ransomware, are compromised user credentials. So for all the advancement we've made, as an industry, we haven't made progress in that area. This will make definitive progress in that area.
Mm-hmm. We've had hardware-based tokens for a while. What makes the ring more accessible or more appealing to people? And is this going to be for everybody, or is this for like a narrow group of users who are really critical and accessing things that are super sensitive?
Today, it's really the latter because of the cost of the ring. The ring is, a lot more expensive than sending an SMS and plain text, which can be hacked. So it does cost more. It costs more than tokens. We see organizations layering on this on top. We're not saying, hey, throw away your, SMS because it's insecure. Most people don't need a higher level of security. But for IT administrators, for people in finance, for senior executives, you do. And this provides that higher level of security that they need. So it won't be for everybody, but it will be for everybody where a breach, somebody getting in that front door and putting ransomware, it has tremendous ROI for them.
Do you think we'll ever get rid of passwords, or will they always be around to one degree or another?
We are members of and strong supporters of FIDO, and passwords should be gone. They should have been gone a decade ago. We're doing our best to eliminate them. There are a lot of other companies that are also trying to eliminate passwords because they have tremendous vulnerability. They keep saying, make them longer, but there's so many ways to attack passwords. Credential stuffing, all the passwords are out there. It's not a secure method, and it should be obsolete. And that's what FIDO and our membership and all the companies that are in that's part of the mission. But this takes it beyond that. This is the more secure method of authentication that you can employ.
You guys just raised another round of funding. What's the plan for that? What are you guys thinking about?
We did. We raised a round of funding. We've got a great VC, Grand Oaks partners. They've got a portfolio of about 15 companies, technology focus, and that funding will allow us to invest in our R&D, build out the engineering team to make the product stronger and deliver the next generations. So that's our number one investment. That's where most of it's going. It's also to carry the news that we have this product. So in demand generation, and you can build a better mousetrap, but if the world doesn't know it, they'll keep buying the old bad mousetrap. So the other part of it is build out the sales organization and create demand, spread the news about this great new product.
So can people customize the ring? I mean, will it be like my college ring where, each individual company has their own look and feel and branding for it, or how far do we go?
We will. Great question. We will have the ability to have companies put their logo on if they want, but it's really not a fashion statement. It's not a piece of jewelry. Right now companies tell people you have to carry your token to work. You have to carry your badge to work. This will be another item that people will have to wear. We think it'll have greater utility and more convenience because people forget their badge, they forget their token, or they leave their token on a desk. Somebody else picks it up. They can now use that token. They can get access to it. A ring, for those of us who are married, something you never lose or misplace. But also, since you just slide it on in the morning, it's always there. It's not pulling it out of a pocket each time you want to authenticate. And I got to plug it into a port or do something else. And those things aren't, impossibly hard to do. It's just much more convenient and much more secure. So, we're not going for a fashion statement here. I think it's beautiful, but I doubt somebody's going to quit their job over it. The ring is silver, and I really wanted black. So we're ready for that.
All right. Well, it sounds like it could be a new and interesting times. I don't know if I can fit another ring on my finger, but we'll see how that goes. But one thing for sure, at least in my house, whenever a ring does go missing, the first thing we do is we call the plumber because odds are it went down the sink somewhere.
well, our ring is both shockproof and waterproof. So even sitting down there in the little U-joint flooded with water, it'll still be fully functional for the person.
All right. At least we know where to start looking for it. Hey, John, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, it's really been my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Back to you guys in the studio.
This is TechstrongTV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Yotam Perkel, who's head of vulnerability research for Resilient, and we'll be talking about Log4j shell vulnerabilities and why they're still with us. Yotam, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Glad to be here.
So you guys just did a study on how many of these vulnerabilities are out there, and it's kind of surprisingly high. So why is that?
So there are several reasons. I think one of the main ones is the fact that although it sounds like, at least to me, or security practitioners that are in the field that are dealing with these vulnerabilities on a day-to-day basis, that no one, there's no one that hasn't heard of Log4Shell. there are probably organizations that are less security aware, that have less mature processes in place, that probably don't even have the ability to validate whether they're vulnerable or not. So let alone do the actual patching. So if they don't know that they're vulnerable, then they won't patch, and they'll still have systems that are exploitable. So I think that's a major reason. Like the more mature organizations, the corporations, hopefully they are more in this point in time, they are already patched, but there's always a long tail of less mature organizations, smaller organizations that are probably still that could explain that fact.
It's not easy to find these things, though, because they are embedded so deeply within Java applications. So is that part of the challenge?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things with specifically with Log4Shell, which is the vulnerability, and Log4j, which is the underlying vulnerable library, is because it's a Java library, and it's often a dependency. So it's not like the application that you run, but you have an application that has to log, and then it basically uses the Log4j library as a dependency. And because of the way Java is structured, basically, or the way the flexibility that Java enables to package code, then you can have an executable that has several layers of, like, you have a jar, which is a Java executable, and within it you have an additional jar, etc. So that layer of those layers of nesting make it difficult for some of the scanners to actually be able to detect it. So that's one problem. There are also, I won't go into it too much, but there are also a various way to package Java application, and some of the scanners have certain gaps. This is also research that we published a while back, that they are not well equipped to identify all these cases. So that's another thing. I think that, those are like the major difficulties with regards to detecting it.
So what should organizations be doing to detect this vulnerability? Is there a set of best practices? Are there tools, or what's missing in the equation?
Yeah, so a term that is often thrown in the air, like in the last 6 months or so, even a bit before, is SBOM. Like software bill of materials, you have to know what you have, what are the components that are that your software is comprised of. And once you have a way to know that, then identification is easier. You don't have to scan your system constantly to understand what's in there, if you already have this software bill of materials that you can refer to in case a vulnerability such as Log4Shell turns out. You simply look across your ecosystem and all those software bill of materials, and identify what are the applications that are vulnerable. The problem is that the landscape for it is still not completely mature. Like, it's one thing when you have your code, then usually, or hopefully, or the likelihood that what's running in it is higher. But in our day and age, people don't write code from scratch. They use third-party libraries. So in one hand, this enables the organization to run faster, release code faster. But on the other hand, it's you basically get an inherited security risk. And with this third-party software, and it could be open source, and it can be even commercial software that you use, you don't always know what's in there. And that's, again, an additional challenge.
Do you think that the bad guys are out looking for this vulnerability now? And do they have tools to go scan for it, or how are they finding it?
Yeah, so basically the same procedures that we did in our research, it's the same goes for attackers. Like you can have an adversary that does the same thing. It's not basically it is pretty common knowledge what applications, at least like a large amount of the services that are impacted released, security advisories said, okay, we were impacted. We patched this in version X. So what are those services? And what's left for an attacker is basically to try to identify services that he knows that are vulnerable just in versions that are still not patched. And that you can do in several ways. The way that we went about it in our research is using Shodan, which is like an open source tool that allows you basically like a search engine, but for internet connected devices. So if you have a server that is internet facing, then Shodan will be able to identify, and Shodan is one example, but there are other services like that. And then if you have a service that is exposed to the internet, there are ways that you can deduce in some cases versions of software that is running in it. And if you identify a vulnerable version, then that's a target that is exploitable. That's basically the methodology that we use in our research.
Right. We've been talking about DevSecOps forever and a day. Do you think that these vulnerabilities are going to drive more people down that path? And what are the challenges in actually getting there?
Yeah, so I do think that, step by step, the industry is improving in that sense, and DevSecOps practices are being adopted more and more, and DevSecOps maturity. There are more organizations that are more mature in there's like a spectrum of maturity, then we do see organizations that are more mature, that have proper tooling in place and CI and CD mechanisms, and monitoring that allows them to detect these kinds of vulnerabilities, but I think we still have a long way to go. And if we earlier discussed a bit about SBOM. So again, even if you have like a third-party vendor that you acquire software from, then I think there's still some amount of education to be made, like for that particular customer to say to the vendor, okay, I like your software, I'd like to buy it, but I want you to provide me with the software bill of materials as a precondition to the purchase. And there are steps that are being made in that direction, from the government and on federal in federal, agencies or organizations, but on the like more commercial front, I think there's still some way to go.
What is your sense of the role of cybersecurity teams going to be going forward? Because it feels like, historically we just kind of threw over various vulnerabilities and developers may or may not have chosen to follow up on those. Is that going to get better? Is there a way to start prioritizing things?
So, yeah, I think prioritization is actually key. I think because as we said earlier, a lot of the software that you use and as an organization isn't software that you actually wrote. You don't control. You use, for example, like a Docker container, or that you can run it in its latest version one day, and then you run the latest version the next day, and it's a different version, and now you introduce a new vulnerability to your environment. So I think two things are critical in that sense. One is visibility. You have to have the tooling in place in order to know what's running in your environment. And the other thing is, like you said, prioritization, because we live in a world where like there's no organization that doesn't have vulnerabilities at all, like from the reasons that we mentioned. So you have in some organizations tens of thousands of vulnerabilities, depending on the size of the organization, like the amount of compute that they have, and you need a smarter way to be able to prioritize fixing these vulnerabilities, so that you can focus on the ones that actually matter, the ones that are likely to be exploited, the ones that are actually being, that are applicable to code that is actually being used and being run and executed. Because if you have a package that is installed and is just sitting on disk and it's not running, then it's not likely to be exploited, because you need to have code running loaded to memory in order for an exploit to be to have something to exploit. You have to have a running process. So that there are all sorts of strategies and methods for smarter, better prioritization that will allow these organizations to actually focus on the vulnerabilities that matter most, or at least start with them, and thus improving their security posture.
Do you think we're going to see more of these so-called zero-day vulnerabilities? Because that seems to be where the shock to the system is people wake up one day and they're just, running around with their heads chopped off because, they weren't expecting this, and suddenly it's there. And will there be more of that kind of? Yeah.
So I think it'd be irresponsible on my end to say that we won't be encountering those, because, as long as people are writing code, there'll be bugs, and those bugs sometimes lead to vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities will be exploited, and there's no silver bullet. So again, sometimes I think there has to be basically a shift of mindset that you should assume that at some point in time you would be vulnerable or susceptible to some kind of exploitation, and you have to be ready for it. So whether it be having the right tools, as we said, or processes in place, whether it be performing tabletop exercises, for example. Okay, let's say that tomorrow morning this package Y is vulnerable with a critical vulnerability. Please, security team, let me know where we have this package installed on our environment. As a CISO, for example. Basically, organizations, security practitioners, they can't assume that these things won't continue to happen at some frequency. Sometimes it will be relevant or applicable to their organization. Sometimes it won't. But that's the mindset I think that we have to adopt.
All right. As you kind of look at all this, what's your best advice to folks? What should they be thinking about? And what's the action item?
So I think specifically with regards to Log4Shell or Log4j vulnerabilities, I think at this point in time, if you haven't addressed it by now, then I think apart from making sure that you're not vulnerable and patching where needed, you have to basically assume compromise, because it's been over 6 months since this vulnerability was released. There are multiple evidence of it being exploited in the wild. So at this point in time, if you find yourself still susceptible, after you patch, try to do some incident response actions and try to identify whether you see any suspicious behavior or things that are out of place in your system, because Log4Shell is an initial access type of vulnerability. So it could be that someone has used it in order to gain initial access to your organization, and it just sits and waits for the right moment to perform any kind of action. It can be data exfiltration. It can be something that is more devastative, like a denial of service and things of that sort. So So that is what I would say, for one. And in general, again, making sure that your organization has the right tooling in place to be able to identify that. And also, I would say, it's not a one-off thing. Like, you have to have these things running periodically, because we saw with one of our customers that, they were aware of Log4Shell. They did patch it, but then they had like CI processes that kept pulling in vulnerable components into the environment. And then it's irrelevant. Everything they did, all the work that they have accomplished, if you're not aware of that, then you're still vulnerable and you don't even know it. So continuous monitoring and visibility, I think, is key.
All right, great. Hey, it's a never-ending battle. Yotam, thanks.
Yeah. My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Mike.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's TechstrongTV episodes. We had some great content in there. Of course, our friend Mike Rizard and Mitchell and Charlene. We jumped from KubeCon to RSA to here in studios in Boca, and we hope you enjoyed it. We are out. Tomorrow will be a repeat show of Best Of, and then we'll be live Monday from Israel at Yalla DevOps. So we hope join us there, or join us here from there. And but until then, though, have a great weekend. Be safe, be well, be strong. Tech Strong. We're out.